Do you like wrestling trivia? Then check out the 5-star match game, the Pro Wrestling Quiz Show. I'm Joe Gagney, and every episode, I grill 3 contestants with 5 rounds of power-packed wrestling trivia. We have over 30 evergreen episodes in the archives covering WWE, AEW, Japan, Mexico, and much, 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 much more. Play along at home and check it out today.
This podcast is a member of the Voices of Wrestling Podcasting Network. Visit voicesofwrestling.com to hear the rest of our great podcasts, as well as show reviews, columns, opinions, and updates across the world of wrestling.
Welcome back to Open the Voice Gate, Rewind and Rewatch. This is our final episode for the 25th anniversary series. This week we will be talking about December 1st, 2016 and the class of 2016. Open the Voice Gate is a member of the Voices of Wrestling Podcast Network. You can find us on the Voices of Wrestling podcast feed or our own dedicated Open the Voice Gate feed on all podcast platforms and applications. You can follow us on social media at Open Voice Gate. If you'd like to donate to the show, click the link in the show notes. It'll take you to our redcircle.com landing site. You click the red box that says sponsor this podcast, and you can set up a one-time or reoccurring donation. No obligation whatsoever, but we would like to thank all of our past donors. I'm one of your hosts. It's your old pal, Mike Spears, joined alongside your other host, Case Lowe. And Case, Happy New Year, buddy. It's been a little bit.
Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, happy to be here. Thank you to everybody who slapped the Red Circle donations button in the holiday season. Greatly appreciated. Merry Christmas to you guys especially, and you guys will have a Happy New Year. And how are you?
You know, it's been a busy few weeks for me. I mean, a lot of travel to and from Florida, and then spent my New Year's at my father-in-law's ranch teaching my niece and nephews about fireworks safety.
That's good. That's a good thing to instill in the younger generation. I don't ever envision a scenario in my life in which I'm lighting off a firework for the fear of safety. So I don't think I have to worry about that, but I'm glad that you are hammering that down in the next generation.
You know, I mean, it's a whole lot of don't kick that firework. It's still smoking. Oh, wait, it's embering. Now we need to go get the hose and turn the water on. You know, I've really embraced the idea of being the fun uncle, to be quite honest, because I can do these things. And
that's the perfect role for you.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like that for me, I teach them about gambling. I teach them about fireworks. And, you know, after like those few things, I mean, I'm just trying to get them away from their screens. So that's why the fireworks worked out so well.
I like that. I read half of a book while I was on vacation.
Which book?
It's one that I was actually going to recommend to you off the air because it seemed like something you might like. The title of it, let me grab it here real quick. It's called Football for a Buck: The Crazy Rise and Crazier Demise of the USFL. It is the Jeff Pearlman USFL book. It's fantastic.
Yeah, Jeff Pearlman wrote to my... in my opinion, one of the greatest sports books ever about the Dallas Cowboys. So I'm intrigued by that because the Dallas Cowboys book was wild that he wrote.
Yes, Boys Will Be Boys is the Cowboys book. And then he wrote Showtime, which got turned into the HBO series. And he wrote Three Ring Circus, which was... I've never read it, but I'm personally fond of it as it acts as a multi-chapter burial of Kobe Bryant, which I'm always in favor of. But the USFL one is good. I read it for a variety of reasons, but it's just every chapter. It's like, oh man, I can't believe that happened. That's absolutely insane. And it's been a very enjoyable read so far.
Yeah, it's something for me that like I feel that Pearlman has found like this niche of, oh, I'm going to go find the insane stories that are going to happen. And it really seems like after he got all of the kind of backlash about the Barry Bonds biography, he just decided, you know what place I can go to, Case, and I could go get really into it, and no one's going to put up a stink, and everyone's going like, yeah, that makes sense. The 1990s Dallas Cowboys.
Yeah, he's good on TikTok. I wasn't really familiar with him until I started seeing his videos, and he's just got good anecdotes from his time at Sports Illustrated about a bunch of different topics and is able to add a historical spin on some contemporary stuff that's happening. I didn't realize he was the one that wrote the original John Rocker story, where John Rocker, for those that don't know, was the Atlanta Braves pitcher who was violently racist and homophobic and otherwise awful, who's, shocker, now doing a right-wing grift on Twitter. Who would have guessed? And Perlman's the one that wrote that initial story. So once I realized that was him, I got pretty into the short form videos that he does. And so I wanted to read one of his books, and the USFL one looked like the most interesting one to me. So that would be my recommendation if you're looking to read more and spend less time on screens in 2025.
Yeah, I'm going to have to check that out. I've become, in 2024, I was a big audiobook guy. I got my library card, and the amount of audiobooks that are for anyone's like rental if you get a library card is insane.
Libraries are cool.
And that's the official stance of the Voice Gate 2025. Libraries are cool. Get your library card. Love them a lot. Got done with this. This is a tough book to recommend to people just because of kind of what the subject matter is. But I finished this book that was done by the author of The Splendid and the Vile, which was a really interesting kind of way of looking at the start of World War II, Eric Larson. He did another book that was about the steps to the fall of Fort Sumter and this in the U.S. Civil War, but taking it by going like, okay, here's how much hypocrites like the Southern planter class was, and here is Abraham Lincoln trying to figure out what to do about this fort. And it was one of the more interesting books I listened to, but it's also just because subject matter. I feel like Civil War history is something that's for bygone generations, and the Zoomers, the Alphas, and the Betas just don't have any interest in whatsoever, or just are kind of like, I know that happened, man, but that was like 200 years ago.
I struggle with it myself. Post World War II is when I get fired up about anything, but even World War II, it's just a little much. It's a little too old. My comment that nobody seems to take this comment seriously. The thing that I'm most impressed about when it comes to World War II is the fact that pilots who are flying into battle on any side of the war in any location, the fact that they were able to figure out where they were going and end up at the right location, that's I can't get anywhere without a GPS now. And they were flying across the world in an unknown location and getting to the right spot. That's my only World War II thing, is just, God, that sounds, I can't imagine that.
So The Splendid and the Vile talks about it's about Churchill and the Blitz, basically, and like the English response and them kind of holding fast and trying to convince FDR to get in. But like a whole portion about it is about how like the bombing of the Blitz, how the Germans were able to do that, and their navigation systems were light beams. There were like light beams that they like would have to like sync up that were being like sent from things, and it just was wild, like the way they were able to. And it's the same thing for the Allied powers as well, like just as much so, just being able to like to locate and be able to find this like before radar, before really communications whatsoever. I mean, you could radio, but it's not like that, like, but you'd have to have like repeater towers, and that's not really how things worked in World War II. So yeah, no, you're absolutely saying
it's a nightmare.
Yeah, the book about Fort Sumter is called The Demon of Unrest, and it's the guy who was in charge of Fort Sumter was quite a figure. I'll say that, like the Union guy who was, his name was Major Anderson, and he basically like negotiated it into like, keeping everyone alive and making it a bloodless kind of battle, essentially. And then later going back and being the one who raised the American flag back on Fort Sumter in 1865. So that's what I got through this year. That and a whole bunch of sci-fi books.
I'm out on that. No, thank you.
Yeah, famously, Case Low, not about science fiction.
No, not a giant dork. A question I have for you regarding contemporary wrestling that definitely isn't a dork question. Mike, did you watch the Christmas Day Freedoms Korakuen Hall show?
I have not seen Bloody Xmas because I'm the only person who has watched GLEAT version 14.
Okay, we're gonna talk about that later because we've got another show to do this week where we're doing 2024 awards and a 2025 preview. And we're gonna talk about that GLEAT show that you are the only person outside of the 1,100 that were there that has watched that show. But I wanted to ask about the Freedoms thing because I mean I've probably watched under 10 Freedoms matches in my life. Not a promotion I've ever had any sort of desire to check out. Even when the pimped matches come out, it's like, no, I don't want to watch that. I'm good. But the photos of YAMATO circulating were so gory and so bloody that I thought, you know what? I should check out this Yamato Freedoms run. And all it did was instill the idea that the reason that especially FMW was so popular at one point was because people were consuming it through photography instead of videography. You don't need to watch the Freedom Show. The photos of Yamato are far more interesting than the video of Yamato.
Yeah, like there's a lot of times I feel that when Dragon Gate and Dragon Gate guys go to other promotions, I'm like, okay, that's fun. That's cool. Like whenever Shun shows up somewhere, we're like, okay, can we see what Shun's up to? Yamato and death matches is like a unique combination that I know that him and Sasaki have like a long-standing relationship. They're both from the same town. Let's see if I can remember this off the top of my head. Ichinoseki Owate. And that's the basis of this. I saw the photos and I was like, oh, he finally bled, because I was like, this whole storyline is how he would be the tag team champion, but did not want to do death matches.
Yeah, it's a fun little deal. I mean, I've liked watching it, or I guess following it from afar. And I thought, well, it's Korakuen. Maybe, who knows? I've been watching a lot of wrestling lately, like older wrestling that I'm either revisiting for the first time in years, as we're going to do with this Rewind and Rewatch today, or I'm watching stuff from eras that I'm familiar with, but it's wrestling that I missed out on when I was going through this sort of stuff. I maybe watch All Japan and New Japan from this time, but I never watched FMW. And it's like, okay, I've been watching more FMW lately. And I was just sort of hoping that Freedoms was going to jump out at me and that I would really, really enjoy this match. And I would have this whole other sort of Yamato thing to enjoy and check in on. And it wasn't bad, but it also it wasn't as good as I wanted it to be. Maybe it was a victim of expectation more than anything, because some of the photographs were so incredible coming out of that show. But it's kind of just a match where Yamato happens to bleed a lot.
Yeah, and at least as someone that I'm not deathmatch adverse, to be clear. Like, I had a college roommate who was like, oh, I somehow found the one like indie pro wrestling fan at my college, and we lived together, and he was like, oh, you could watch that Dragon Gate show, but after this I want to watch IWA Mid-South. So like, I've gone through all this. It just seems like for someone like Yamato and how he works and like his general like mindset about wrestling, it did kind of seem like that this is, oh, he's hanging out with his friend, even though he's eventually going to take a light tube shot and he's not going to be happy about it.
Yeah, he fell onto a board of, I think they were jagged cans, and that was gross. I did not like that.
Yeah. God. Micah, I watched the Stardom Dream Queendom show. She somehow, like, because she had like a beer can board, managed to just like start gushing for like the first 5 minutes of the match.
Yeah, that's gnarly. I don't know. It's never been my thing.
Yeah, I respect it, but I'm not going to be the person. I'm not going to be one of those like 2019 Masashi Takeda Wrestler of the Year kind of people. And that'll never be me.
No, couldn't be us. No, we're watching the Great Tokyo Dome City Hall show instead.
I mean, I can't help it. I can't help it. When you have Psycho Clown versus Takahiro Yamamura on the 1 year anniversary of Takahiro Yamamura's second return to pro wrestling case, someone has to testify about this. You're not the only one that said, Mike, why did you do this? Multiple people said, Mike, why did you watch this Great show? And someone has to testify and say, I saw it. You don't need to.
So, like Cubs talks about all the time, he wonders how many English-speaking people are subscribed to the Fan Leyenda tier on the CMLL YouTube channel, which is the $34 one that gets you all the live shows. And let's estimate high. Let's say there's 500 people living in America that are in an English-speaking household that have no root, they have no family south of the border. There are white guys like me that are subscribing to Fan Leyenda. Let's say there's 500 of them. Do you think there's 100 people outside of Japan that are subscribing to the Glate YouTube service, even though it's what, $8?
It is $9.99 or $8.99.
Oh my god.
Yeah, 100 is the magic number of that. Like, if you said 50, I would say more. If you said 200, I would say less. 100, it seems like a pretty. It's a number that I think you can hang your hat on. I just don't see, because I have no idea what the rest of the subscription things are going to be. Is everything going to be behind the paywall now for Glate? And this $8.99?
I don't think we're getting free Glate shows anymore. Maybe I'm wrong, but I thought it was all behind the paywall now.
I will never hear anyone try to defend Hayato Tamura again. That makes me very happy.
Yeah, well, okay, we'll do this now. You're the only person I know that's watched this show. I have seen it pop up on zero websites. I have seen zero people discuss it other than the guy in the Voice of Wrestling Discord who was at the show, who wasn't like a GLEAT fan. He just happened to be in Japan for other shows and kind of stumbled in there. And I don't know even the photos, like, just from the way my Twitter feed is like, when there's a big GLEAT show, I normally see a bunch of photos of people that I follow that are at the show, or, it just sends me photos of these people. I didn't even see that. This show almost doesn't exist. It's like the old Jim Crockett WWN shows. I'm not even sure it happened.
Yeah, like, it is really remarkable, just like the vibe of it, because the whole like description of like, oh, this is like a lost show. The energy given on that show was one. It's like, oh yeah, no, this is not going to be like that one random like Dragon Gate show that we found from 2014. They were like, holy shit, this was awesome. We lost this. No one needs to go back to this. And it feels like, at least watching it, that people during the time of the show just were either there for Kazuhiko Nakajima or they weren't really there at all. It just really, really dark stuff. And Soma Watanabe, sure, why not? Give him a shot at this point.
Yeah, why not? I mean, that was my reaction to it. Was I guess that's a lateral move with a chance that it's an upward move, but it's not anything that made me go, oh my god, I got to see this match.
Right, yeah. And like up and down the rest of the card, it's just bad times, bad vibes. Like, it's I the only match that I had at above 3.25 stars was Yamamura versus Psycho Clown, which is a wild thing to say.
It's my worst promotion of the year. I feel very strongly that for as bad as AAA is, and nobody needs that to be explained to them. We all know AAA is universally bad, but the Vampiro stuff, as silly as it was and as ridiculous as it was, it drew money. That was like a real thing that people cared about. And
there was a reason why they went and made sure they did Vampiro's farewell and like Tulasingo and places.
Yeah, it was like the Muto retirement, where it was this long drawn out process, but it was drawing money no matter how bad it might have been.
Right. Yeah. No. They dropped 500 tickets. Like, they went 1,500 in July to 1,045 last week.
That's awful.
And that all can't be Kota Ibushi fans not showing up.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's not all Kota Ibushi fans. It was a lame card. I'm trying to put myself in the position of, okay, let's say I live in Tokyo and I have very little responsibilities Christmas week. I'm probably buying a ticket to that Freedom show to go see YAMATO in that match. There's no way, given that GLEAT card, that I would have bought a ticket to that show if I lived in the area.
Yeah, like, you just can't rationalize it. Like, do you really, unless you're a real dyed-in-the-wool Fujiwara guy, and then you're probably like 80 years old at that point,
Yeah, God, those photos made me sad of him.
Dude, he tried to leave immediately. Ugh. Like, he looks bad, but like, that's a guy who at least had like enough wits about him going like, I don't want to be in this longer than I have to.
No, because Fujinami is incredibly old, and I'm not going to do the thing that people do with Fujiwara where they pretend he's still really good. Like, Tatsumi Fujinami is one of my favorite wrestlers of all time, but
he looks appropriately for a 71-year-old man.
Exactly. Like, it's not sad in the same way that it is for Fujiwara. I also don't, but I don't really want to see him either at this stage in his career. I would rather just go back and watch old Fujinami matches. The Fujiwara thing is just a giant bummer. The fact that whether he needs the money or he just can't stop, the fact that he's putting himself in that position is sad. The fact that there's just video of it is sad. The fact that he moves around the way that he does is sad. The whole thing just sucks.
It does, but happy belated birthday, Tatsumi Fujinami. Turned 71 last week.
One of the 5 greatest wrestlers of all time. I think the most underrated. Chris Sellner was talking about this on Twitter tonight, actually, about how because of the New Japan copyright strikes and how strict they are about all this stuff, we're really losing New Japan history with a new generation of wrestling fans. And part of that, the comment that was made that set Zellner off was somebody saying that New Japan in the 90s didn't really matter. It was all about All Japan, which is, of course, not only factually inaccurate, but just an insane thing to say. And, Fujinami from 77 or 78 until the end of my demarcation point is very clear with him from the late 70s until the end of the tag league in 1998 is one of the best wrestlers ever, and has a style that is really unique that isn't really seen in modern wrestling at all. His matches with Choshu, phenomenal. I love his hour-long match with Inoki from Yokohama in 88. His matches with Hashimoto in the early 90s, all fantastic. Tatsumi Fujinami, great guy. Don't want to see him in 2025, but I love him in his prime.
Yeah, and you look at that prime and you have to go, wow, that's over 20 years.
I mean, starting off as a junior heavyweight in New Japan in the 70s, and then transitioning into this underdog heavyweight, and then going into the UWF stuff, and then by the end of the 80s, he's sort of top dog in New Japan, and then has this really interesting and sort of prolonged old guy run in the 90s, where you not only have the sets of matches with him and Hashimoto over the IWGP title, which both of those matches are really, really good. He's heavily involved and really, really good in the War feud in 92 and 93. And he's got the Tenryu match in 96. And then again, he and Hashimoto team up in the 98 tag league. And a lot of that stuff is out there. And a lot of that stuff is really, really good. And there's sort of a narrative out there that post, 92 or 93 Fujinami's wash. And that's just not the case. He's really good up until 98. And then some people say that he's washed after 92, 93, and then some people go a little bit further with it and they like him into the early 2000s. I personally do not. At that point, he just works too slow for my liking, but through 98, phenomenal pro wrestler.
Yeah, and when you think about through 98, he's already, okay, I'm doing the math backwards. This is dangerous for me, Case. He's already in his late 40s at that point.
Yeah. He's got a 20-year run, a legitimate 20 years of being incredible and doing it in Japan, obviously, both as a junior and as a heavy. He has really good American matches with Flair, the Mexico stuff that we have of him, which is very little, but that's very good. It's, the guy rocks. And I think is of the people that we consider to be the all-time greats, you have your pillars, you have, for the sake of the argument, let's say Shawn Michaels, and you have Shingo and Rey Mysterio Jr. and Kurt Angle, if you want to throw him in there, Vader. I think all of these guys, a common, in air quotes, but a common wrestling fan would understand those guys are all-time greats. I think Fujinami's name in there would throw a lot of people off, but Fujinami is very much in that conversation.
You know what I feel like Fujinami is, and you're going to have to go with me for a second on this. I feel like people's perception of Fujinami changes when you're watching that 80s and early mid-90s stuff. As much, you might go oh, this guy, he's the dragon, so oh, he's special for that, but he's super old. Kind of like Nick Bockwinkel, where you don't really appreciate Nick Bockwinkel until you actually sit down and start watching him,
oh my god,
deeply.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, look, if we had more Bach on tape, I would feel comfortable saying that he's a better wrestler than Flair, because I kind of think Bach is a better wrestler than Flair. And Fujinami is better than a lot of his contemporaries, even if for whatever reason his contemporaries have a larger legacy at this point.
Yeah, I mean, his natural, actually generational peer, when we talk about legacy, and someone who we've talked about a lot over the last few months, Grand Hamada. You talk probably about, at least on our show, and in the vein that we kind of talk about, we believe that he is the grandfather of the modern wrestling style, and he gets a certain level of cachet with that. And Fujinami, for better or for worse, does not necessarily get that. When arguably, I mean, when you're talking about the New Japan stars that came in after Inoki, he should be one of the first ones out of your mouth.
Well, okay, I've thought about this for years, and I don't really know what to do with it. I would like to turn this into some sort of long-form writing, but I don't, I think about this all the time, but I don't really know where to go with it. Is if you've ever listened to this podcast before, the deal with Hamada, where it's Hamada, he trains Ultimo, there's all the Universal Wrestling guys that become the Michinoku guys, that splinters off Notori Yamato and Osaka Pro, and the Hamada legacy at this point is pretty clear. But Fujinami is, to me, just as influential on the junior heavyweight side, but in the way that without Fujinami, Bryan Danielson's Ring of Honor run doesn't happen, and there's no Roderick Strong. And Fujinami, in a weird way, especially as a junior, is working the proto to what would become the Ring of Honor main event style.
Oh,
and
absolutely.
It's just a different wing. To me, it's the fork in the road, right? And one way is Hamada and his style of junior heavyweight wrestling, and the other side is Fujinami and a more technical approach to junior heavyweight wrestling. And I don't know fully where that lineage goes from to get from Fujinami to Danielson, let's say. Like, I don't know who's all in the middle of that. I would guess you would go like Fujinami into, well, he didn't really wrestle Eddie, but like
Liger and Eddie.
Yeah, like Eddie, Malenko, Benoit, and then it sort of ramps up into your Ring of Honor guys. But to me, that all starts with Fujinami.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And then, like, weirdly enough, you're like talking about the late 80s, early 90s, and then into like the mid 90s, New Japan junior heavyweight roster, which people will try to, as you were saying, act like it was not like an incredible conglomeration of talent happening at one point.
That's like, it's not only the juniors. Like, I think that the New Japan heavyweights of the 90s are now incredibly underrated because you
don't have to sell me on Big Hash. You don't have to.
But that's the thing. Like, I think a lot of people need to be sold on Hashimoto and need to be sold on that era of Kensuke Sasaki. And it's just, it's old. Like, I fucking get it. That stuff's 30, almost 40 years old. So I get that not everybody is with it. The New Japan World Archives suck. I understand that. And you can't really talk about it because any GIF or any photo is going to be taken down. So it's a self-fulfilling prophecy in a way, but it's all really good. I mean, it's not all really good because there's some absolute garbage on New Japan shows in the 90s, but the stuff that's good is as good as anything has ever been.
Oh, absolutely. And I just kind of just look at it as just because of the overall just content control that happens over there. And I think that's a little bit of like weirdly, not to sidebar back into that, I think that's kind of why GLEAT decided that they wanted to do that, other than the idea that someone finally looked at the books and said, this doesn't make sense. I feel like there's a bit of like, oh, we can better control our content by having a paywall like that. And like the downside of that is you get situations where you miss part of an archive. I mean, think about All Japan. Think about how much of that is actually like accessible. And even Noah's like history pre Cyber Agent at that same time. Like you have like those things, and maybe this is taking matters in their own control, like this saying like, hey, we have it locked down, that way we keep control over it. Maybe that's part of it. But I mean, the downside of it is like the peak of the Three Musketeers, and especially Hashimoto, I feel like it's kind of lost because of it, because of how like the rights were.
I would completely agree with that. And as we jump into our timeline here, unfortunately, we're going to talk about an era of a promotion where they own all of their footage and they have a network and they could make all of this stuff accessible. Unfortunately, it is not all there. But as we go through this timeline, we're going to talk about the class of 2016, the infamous 12-1-16 tag team match, and how we got there. As we go along, I will highlight the matches that are available on the Dragon Gate Network, on the Voices of Wrestling Discord, and the Open the Voice Gate channel. We will have links to all of the matches, and I have taken the liberty of grabbing the December 1st, 2016 Dragon Gate Korakuen Hall show, uploading that to YouTube, and that will be available for everybody listening to this podcast as well. So, Mike, are you ready to do the final 25th anniversary of the Dragon System Rewind and Rewatch podcast?
Absolutely. And with that, we take you back to 2016.
2016, obviously, this is the most recent of any of these timeline podcasts that we've done. By this point, Mike and I were both watching everything in real time. I mean, I'm reviewing this stuff for Voices of Wrestling at this point in time. When you think of 2016 Dragon Gate specifically, overall, what comes to mind?
I think the big story of 2016 kind of bases around the summer, where you have what I would argue one of the stronger builds to a Kobe World main event. You have Yamato finally striking back against Shingo Takagi, being built up like through like the spring, but really kicking off with a huge cage match at Dead or Alive. Yamato wins King of Gate, and then he marches into Kobe World, takes the belt, put it on his shoulder, and then it just all kind of goes to shit in that regard. But similarly, 2016 is the Summer of Eita. It is his real coming out party as a singles wrestler, especially as a up-and-coming babyface and as a person that Dragon Gate would then send to other promotions. And then you talk about, like, this is the wild thing, like the 8 years of hindsight for me is that, I guess really 9 years, but 8 years. 8 years of hindsight for me is going back through this time how apparent the cracks in the foundation, the promotion were in 2016.
Yeah, it is. I echo a lot of those thoughts. To me, I will always consider this to be the peak of popularity among English-speaking fans. And that's something that probably needs to be noted here is New Japan World by this point is fully active and has a real following, and it feels like every big New Japan show is a really big deal. But outside of New Japan, there was this swell of interest in Japanese wrestling because All Japan and DDT and Noah and Dragon Gate and Big Japan, which was very culturally relevant in 2016. It was on the way down, but it was still relevant. And all of these promotions did not have streaming services, which actually made them easier to follow. In the same way that, we had people following Heat Up and Hard Hit and Ganbare Pro and all of these different micro indies. They were all available for free because of people, and rest in peace, Real Hero, and all of these other great people that were making this wrestling accessible. It was a really easy time to consume all of this. The work was so good. I don't even think if all these streaming services went away, right, in February of 2025, that sort of fervor and fandom wouldn't return because the work from an entire country standpoint just isn't as good as it was in 2016. Dragon Gate outside of New Japan was really leading the charge at this point and had a really noticeable following in the Americas and in Europe, and it was just this great time to be a fan up through Kobe World. You're right, the Summer of Eita is absolutely a thing that really happens at this point in time, and then Kobe World happens, and it's a great Kobe World show, and I feel like it is a swift, especially with the benefit of hindsight, it is a swift change immediately following Kobe World. The golden era of this promotion from 2013 to 2016 is over. We are entering uncharted, choppy, rough waters, and that is what a lot of this timeline is going to cover.
Yeah, and I think that when we talk about like the Summer of Eita, we'll talk about this bit in the timeline. This was a 2016 will go down in history as a notable year for Cruiserweight Junior Heavyweight Wrestling happening at the same time too.
It's a huge year for it. It feels like, in a way, 2021 AEW was not only this really special time for the promotion because it was this cool thing that was hot and it had real energy to it, but also for people like you and I and for people that listen to this podcast, it was sort of this victory of, hey, we were right. This style of wrestling that we like can succeed on a national level, and it is good, and people can really invest in this. And in 2016, it maybe wasn't as extreme, but there was this real movement behind junior heavyweight wrestling between, I would argue, Dragon Gate and Evolve and the Cruiserweight Classic, which we're going to talk about a lot in this timeline, and then just this overall Young Bucks bubble, whether it be, them wrestling Time Splitters or Motor City Machine Guns or Red Dragon, Forever Hooligans, Roppongi Vice, Roppongi 3K, whatever was existing in the Bucks universe at that time was also just incredibly consequential and influential in wrestling. 2016 is the year that Ospreay goes to New Japan and he really starts to make a name for himself. And it all sort of happens under this umbrella that, in the same way, we can look at Dragon Gate in 2016, and once Kobe World happens, the rug is pulled out from under them, and this golden era abruptly ends. For junior heavyweight wrestling, they do everything right through crowning TJP the winner of the Cruiserweight Classic, and then as soon as they come to Raw and TJP is the video gamer and Brian Kendrick is the real star of that division, it's all gone. And I don't think we've seen energy towards junior heavyweight wrestling like that since.
Right, and it felt like, especially like we talked about like technology with this, you had this time where, at least in 2016 with the WWE Network, where it was, having the Cruiserweight Classic as its own thing and being treated as its own kind of thing with its own presentation. I know Rich Craich did a whole series about the Cruiserweight Classic last year, but it was its own kind of thing that it really felt like a big era defining kind of program, especially with like how that tournament kind of played through in its way.
I still want a promotion to feel like every episode of the Cruiserweight Classic. I don't understand why wrestling isn't just presented that way as the default setting.
Yeah, it doesn't. It doesn't seem that hard to do.
No, it's I don't get it. It's whatever. But as we get into the timeline, we will start here April 22nd, 2016, because again, the focus of this timeline is primarily the class of 2016, which is the people we now recognize as Ben-Kei, HYO, Shun Skywalker, Yuki Yoshioka, and Katsumi Takashima. We will talk about him when we get there. But we start this timeline April 22nd, 2016, where after working exhibitions on necks for the last few months, Futa Nakamura and Shun Watanabe make their debut on Next 141. T-Hawk beats Nakamura in 7 minutes and 30 seconds, and Shimizu beats Watanabe in 5 minutes and 23 seconds. They are a part of what is recognized as a traditional era, post-millennials, and clearly separate from Kaito Ishida and Takahiro Yamamura, but before the post-Dragon Gate split with Coach Minoura and Dragon Dia and such. The class of 2016 from the beginning is recognized as its own thing, akin to what I would compare them to the class of 1999, the original class of Toryumon guys.
Yeah, and it is such a stark difference when you look at how the eras really were within the Dragon system. You see very quickly that you have this kind of, for lack of better words, this bridge that happens that is this, because you had the millennials and like the people of the millennials generation that closes with El Lindemann, and then Yamamura and Ishida are that bridge to this transition era that we would see. And especially given the state of the dojo at this point, it is worth noting that before this, and I can actually do this, over the almost 8 years before that, the dojo produced 11 people. In the years after 2016, we're in the mid-20s at that point.
Wow.
So like this is a clear delineation, and when you look at how Dragon Gate grew out of Toryumon and the dojo grew out of Ultimo Dragon Gym, this becomes the strongest class since the next generation class, and like putting out people like at such a level. You don't see that. You didn't see that for almost a clear decade. Like the next class was in 2006. And
that's Yamato and KZ and
technically Takashi Yoshida, Mondai Ryu, Koji Shishido shouts out, and Lupin Matsutani
shouts out.
I saw that he worked a random match in 2022, and I'm in a random like Miyagi indie, and I need to go find it because it was like with other it's with other because he stuck around, like he is from like the last Toryumon X class, Shishido. And I did not know this until I was doing research for the Allen show that I did last month.
Wow. Well, yeah. I should note, April 22nd, 2016 is when we start this. I said the names Futa Nakamura and Shun Watanabe. Shun Watanabe, of course, would become Shun Skywalker. Futa Nakamura, for those that don't know, because I guess we're at a point where probably people don't know, Futa Nakamura is Ben-Kei.
That's right. It's worth noting that Futa Nakamura, out of everyone in this class, comes in a lot older. He had a collegiate wrestling career before that, and everyone else, by and large, fresh out of high school.
Yeah, that's true. This is a pretty young class. So that was April 22nd, 2016. We do not have Shun's match from that show, but thanks to the Dragon Gate Network, we do have Ben-Kei's match with T-Hawk. So that will be linked in the Discord and in the show description. The first time that we saw Nakamura, and I'll refer to him as Nakamura until we get to the Ben-Kei name change, April 24th, 2016, Dragon Gate goes to Hakata Star Lanes, and we just so happen to get the dark match on that show on the Infinity airing. It was Jimmy Kness and UT against Kaito Ishida and Futa Nakamura. They go to a 5-minute time limit draw. Mike, do you remember watching this match? Because I certainly do, and I remember the fervor about Nakamura coming out of this 5-minute dark match.
That's right, because at this time, and as we go through the series, Futa Nakamura is much bigger than any other Dragon System trainee outside of Ryotsu Shimizu. Mm-hmm. Like he does this, and you have him teaming with Kaito Ishida, who is barely 20 at this point, and I think coming back from a neck injury at that, and then Jimmy Kness, JKS, and UT at this point very clearly cycled down due to health reasons.
Yeah, I mean, UT was nothing at this point, whereas T-Hawk and Eita and Lindemann were all getting really strong pushes. UT, again, doing dark matches and going to draws against literal rookies. The Nakamura thing, like, I remember this airing and this being a big deal in a way that even with Homare and even with the rightful praise at the time of Kento and of Fujiwara, the Nakamura thing had a bit of a different feel because the rookies that had debuted before him, it was, Yamamura, who's a smaller guy, and Ishida, who if you look at Kick Boy, and also just like, I kind of forgot until I rewatched this match and then the show that we're going to talk about here, December 1st, 2016, how skinny Ishida was. I mean, Ishida now is, and he's not out of shape by any means, but he's twice the size that he was in 2016. And then before that, you're going back to Lindemann. And so Nakamura came in with a mullet and was so muscular and so big and so quick that it immediately felt like we were watching a guy that mattered in a way that all of these rookies, and again, like, Lindemann hit the ground running. Yamamura, by and large, had a pretty good rookie year. Nakamura was just different. It was a big deal as soon as he came into the company.
Right. And it became very clear that he was going to be on a different path. And even at a time where I was doing my old podcast at this point, it was, and of course that was 9 years ago. And with all of that, like, even at that time, it was like, there were murmurs about, like, watch this Nakamura kid. Nakamura kid is, you have the other four, they will be treated upwards. They will take care of them and all of that. But Nakamura is the one that everyone put their chips on.
We go to the Wrestling Observer newsletter on June 20th, 2016. This is shifting gears to talk about the Cruiserweight Classic, where Dave Meltzer says the following. He says, WWE announced 32 participants in its Cruiserweight Classic, which included the number of expected names, some well-known wrestlers, and some complete unknowns. As expected, Kota Ibushi is the top star and the ringer in the tournament. This has been expected ever since Ibushi quit both DDT and New Japan and appeared in the front row at the TakeOver special in Dallas. Ibushi was probably one of the top 5 wrestlers in the business inside the ring when he went down last year due to neck problems, including having the 2015 match of the year with Shinsuke Nakamura at that year's Tokyo Dome show. Ibushi had, even before showing up at the WWE show, talked about being interested. The expectation is Ibushi would be booked strong in the tournament and then get an offer, since WWE has been aggressive at signing new talent with the split rosters and needing to replenish NXT. Perhaps the biggest surprise is a wrestler named Grand Metalik, who is Mascara Dorada, one of CMLL's top stars. The fact that he's not using the Mascara Dorada name says he's coming in without CMLL's blessing. CMLL talent works indie dates on their own all the time, but it's hard to say what the company's position would be on something like this. One would think Dorada would be somebody WWE would want, although his style is very lucha-oriented, and WWE doesn't do that. Another surprise is Akira Tozawa, one of Dragon Gate's top stars. What's notable is that Dragon Gate would be cooperating with both this tournament and its rival tournament, the Super J Cup, which New Japan is producing and debuting on the July 20th Korakuen Hall show. Dave continues to note other people in this tournament: Noam Dar, Damak, Zumbi. I forgot until I read this. Super Crazy helped recruit a lot of these guys.
That's right.
Zumbi being one of them. Raul Mendoza, who is still there, who I would love to break free because I think he's an incredible wrestler. Alejandro Saiz, who was XL in Noah. Damian Slater, who was an Australian guy. And of course, Ho Ho Loon and Jason Lee from Hong Kong. Mike, my one question for you coming out of this is, Dave positions the Cruiserweight Classic and the Super J Cup as rival tournaments. I don't in real time remember them being framed that way, like the Cruiserweight Classic was competing against the J Cup. Do you remember that from 2016, or is this something that maybe Dave is editorializing here?
I think that there's a little bit of truth to it. I do think there's a level of editorializing. I'm trying to think when New Japan announced the Super J Cup 6th stage. It was a long, though, kind of drawn out situation where all the other companies, like, I completely forgot that Kaientai Dojo had a almost month-long tournament to decide Kaiji Tomato joining the tournament. So
goddamn right.
I actually got the date. New Japan announces the Super J Cup on March 3rd. So,
okay.
So we do have the fact that just 3 months later, they're doing the thing. And this is as Super J Cup. So 620 is this publishing from Dave here. The Super J Cup is July 20th and August 11th. So or August 21st, but you had a lot of Super J Cup stuff happening in the various other promotions by this time. Interestingly enough, Dragon Gate's like the one company that just goes like, no, we're sending Eita. We're not doing any of this big league bullshit to decide who's going in there. We'll take your suitcase of money and send Eita.
Yeah, because, like you mentioned the Kaientai Dojo thing, which was a real thing that happened. And then I remember because it was the May Evolve shows that year, because Evolve 2016 is fucking awesome. And I miss it constantly. But they come out of those big Mania weekend shows, which were the biggest shows Evolve ever did. And then in May, they started having Cruiserweight Classic qualifier matches. So it was happening on both fronts. In Japan, there are a lot of promotions booking around, sending a guy to the J Cup. And then in America and in the UK, all of these promotions, it's like weird. If you go back and look at indie cards in May and June, all of a sudden, all of these promotions start doing Cruiserweight Classic qualifying matches, that prior to that had no tie-ins to WWE, but people love being co-opted and then ruined. So, Evolve, Progress, ICW, etc. So that is what happened there. I'll share this note also from the Observer. This is, again, from the June 20th, 2016 Observer. This has nothing to do with the timeline, but I thought this was interesting because I don't remember this. Dave says, the original idea of the tournament was to be a showcase for La Sombra when he was signed, but then they decided to debut him prior to the tournament and keep him out of it. And then Dave goes on to explain that Rich Swann, Dragon Gate alum, and then Johnny Gargano and Tommaso Ciampa, who were still at this point not contracted NXT wrestlers,
right,
would also be working the tournament. But I don't remember the La Sombra thing at all.
Yeah, it's a wild thing because La Sombra loses his mask the last at the anniversary, so in 2015. So
yes,
it was well known that he was WWE bound near immediately, and the fact that I mean that's a long time to keep a guy on ice, to keep him from August or September 2015 to the summer 2016. I think that kind of gives credence to that they threw this thing together pretty quickly.
Yeah, you're right about that. The La Sombra was an all-time Largo Loop photograph guy in the same way, like when Generico went there and started working without the mask, we would always see a ton of photos of him working without the mask. And then La Sombra was like one of those guys. I mean, he went through what felt like a million different gimmick changes before he actually debuted. And then he debuted, and it was before the tournament. And, he was obviously an upstanding employee and always has been and is never difficult to work with. June 20th, 2016, Wrestling Observer. We go a week ahead in the Dragon Gate section. Dave writes this. He says, Yamato captured the 2016 King of Gate tournament, beating Big R Shimizu in the finals using an armbar submission on the June 12th Hakata Star Lane show before a sellout of 1,500 fans. In the semifinals the night before in the same building before 950 fans, Yamato beat Akira Tozawa and Shimizu beat Masaaki Mochizuki. After the match, Yamato put over Shimizu, noting that Yamato is 35 and has a lot of experience, and he is jealous that Shimizu at 23 is in the finals, given that Yamato was a trainee when he was 23. Yamato says he's jealous of what Shimizu's potential was, and then talked about how Shimizu, T-Hawk, Yosuke Santa Maria, and Eita would be carrying the company well into the future.
So just for keeping this a little bit evergreen, we are recording this on January 2nd, 2025, and currently Big Boss Shimizu is suspended. But all four of those people, when you look at it, Yosuke Santa Maria, not an active full-time wrestler anymore. Eita, now GHC champion. They didn't change his name. Okay, by the way.
Oh, that sucks. Okay, all right. Well, I'll continue to have my Eita scoop in my pocket until they change his name.
And then T-Hawk is jobbing to the Tokyo Yankees right now.
There's going to be a few of these, both Dave's writing and the J translations of the time, and then my own personal writing, which we'll share as we get a little bit deeper into this timeline. There is some stuff that is sadly aggressively 2016 that has not aged great, but at the time, this was the thought process, was before we even had HYO and Shun and Yoshioka come into the company, before Daya and Minoru 2 years down the line. At the time, you're thinking like, oh my God, Eita is a Wrestler of the Year candidate. And then you've got T-Hawk, who at this time was in Monster Express, who was doing great work. Shimizu, who was a Monster Express. And I will continue to rave. This match with Yamato, this King of Gate Finals, is so underappreciated because it happened in Hakata and not Korakuen. And so it's just kind of forgotten about and lost at a time. It's an incredible match. It's one of the best Dragon Gate matches of 2016. And Maria, if that sounds odd to maybe a newer Dragon Gate fan, this is the peak of Maria's career.
Yep.
This wouldn't have fit in June 2015 or June 2017, but in June 2016, that was not an insane thing to say.
Yeah, and just like timeline wise for me, this is mashing together with the Akira Tozawa show I did with Alan last month, and it's like, 2016 King of Gate, you had Akira Tozawa having like an all-time career block stage, and then Eita just killing it with people. But Maria is the backbone of a Tribe Vanguard, or what would become a Tribe Vanguard unit that is at least out the blocks, feels like something, and then very quickly becomes nothing.
Maria, at this current stage in time, if we're talking June 2016, she's the Brave Gate champion.
Right.
And she wins the belt from Kotoka at Champion Gate that year. And part of this, I think, is just the different voices that were a little bit more prominent in the Dragon Gate space at the time, really latching onto the Maria character and really latching onto that match. But Maria Kotoka was an incredibly emotional title match, and her run up through losing the belt to Eita at World that year is a really important and really impressive run. And from there again, the only other relevant thing she would do is basically be the glue to Tribe Vanguard, and she would have those great trios matches with KZ and UT at a time where both of those guys were ready to elevate up the card. But the Maria thing, like for a brief moment in time, she really, really mattered to the day-to-day of this promotion.
Yeah, absolutely so. And especially when we talk about how the promotion was shaping up in 2016, there was such like I don't want to call it like an underclass, but you had like a Brave division that had a lot of people that were just really breaking out and were kind of foisted into the spotlight. And I think the person that does that the most out of anyone and brings those folks up, it was Akira Tozawa in 2015, getting those finally, like after the Eternal Reign, dropping the belt to Kotoka, but during that reign having the matches against Maria and others that really got the Brave Gate into a position that at least in 2016 and into 2017 that felt like it was at a place that, oh wow, we could really end up seeing stuff like Eita versus the future Hyo Watanabe. Like it felt like that there was like an ability there that like, oh, El Lindemann feels like he was going to be just about to be in that picture. And it did really feel like that there was a strong Brave Gate era happening at this point.
On July 7th, 2016, Dragon Gate announced their Summer Adventure Tag League lineup that would start on August 6th in Tokyo at Shinjuku Face, which is worth noting because Korakuen Hall was under construction at that time. So they ran a doubleheader in Shinjuku Face on August 6th instead of their usual August monthly Korakuen stop. That tournament would go from August 6th until September 10th in Osaka. The teams for this tournament, Jimmy Susumu and Jimmy Kagetora, Genki Horiguchi and Ryo Saito, Masato Yoshino and T-Hawk, Takahiro Yamamura and Kaito Ishida, Naruki Doi and brother Yashi, who returned to the company earlier that year, and Yosuke Santamaria and El Lindemann in the A block. The B block was Yamato and BB Hulk, Akira Tozawa and Big R Shimizu, Dragon Kid and Eita. Originally, it was going to be Shingo Takagi and Kotoka, but Kotoka would be out injured, and so Cyber Kong joined up with Takagi, and instead of Cyber Kong and Mandai Ryu, you had CIMA and Gamma and Osaka 06 replace them. And the final team in the B block, and this is worth noting because up to this point, he had only had one televised match, and it was a dark match, Masaaki Mochizuki and Futa Nakamura. And when this happened, compiled with the July 10th Osaka show, in which Nakamura worked another dark match, this one against Kaito Ishida, 5-minute time limit draw, we were off to the races with this guy, Mike. Everybody, when that lineup came out, kind of gave it the, like Nakamura is not going to win any matches, but the fact that he was in this tournament was a big deal.
Yeah, and especially in a tournament where the A block set tag teams, really. I mean, you had original Jimmys, Muraha Asapa, Yamamura and Ishida, Doi and Yashi were doing a heel T2P kind of reuniting thing, and the Marylands. Maria and Lindemann were doing their big storyline where El Lindemann was trying to romance Maria and get invited into Tribe Vanguard. So you had that all happening in the A block, whereas the B block felt a lot more wide open if you gave a little bit more credence to Dragon Kid and Eita being kind of the top team going into it. So you had like a lot of Yamato and BB Hulk at this time. Yeah, they are now in Tri Vanguard, but we have to look at this in 2016 eyes. This is before the time where these two and Kai basically dominated the Twin Gate scene for 2 years. This was still a relatively fresh matchup. Akira Tozawa did not really have a solid tag team partner in Monster Express after the Shingo turn, so he gets Shimizu. Shingo and Kotoka, they were trying to kind of do the Shingo and Punch Tominaga thing. And then Cyber Kong and Mondai Ryu, that's just getting another Berserk team in the lineup there. So you really needed that spice added by Mochi teaming with a rookie here. And that became such a big deal, I think, because of how the tournament was set up, that it was kind of made and manufactured that everyone would go like, ooh, Futa Nakamura is getting in this already.
So July 10th, he makes tape in Osaka. July 11th, he works a Prime Zone match against Akira Tozawa. That will be linked in the show description if you've never seen that. I'll come back to the J-Cup here in a second, Mike, because we'll parlay this into Kobe World 2016, where we get the first, what I would call purposeful Futa Nakamura match, where he's actually on the main card. He's not in a dark match, and he works this opener at Stockbridge Ichikawa and Shimizu and Sachioka Boy and Yuti, and they beat the four-way team of Genki, Ryo Saito, Kness, and Futa Nakamura. I wrote in my review at the time, this is published in late July 2016, I said, I talk a lot about the future of Dragon Gate in my reviews, and with El Lindemann, Kaito Ishida, and Takahiro Yamamura, the future looks very bright. But no future looks brighter than Nakamura's. Less than 15 minutes of his career have made tape at this point, and he already is very good. He didn't eat a pin here. Kness did. He put power moves on his opponents, and in the end, he was the star of the match. I can't wait to see where this kid goes. Keep your eyes on him. Do not skip this match if you haven't seen Nakamura before.
One of the 100 Stockbridge Ichikawa wins in his career.
That's right. We were doing that math in a separate Discord earlier this week.
Hey,
very good. Very good. So Nakamura making tape here, this is, I feel like one of the more watched Kobe Worlds among Western fans. And in my review, it's Shingo and Yamato was the match that everybody cared about, but this opening match had Nakamura, and I felt like it was worth noting that this is somebody people really need to have their eyes on. The other thing happening around this time, and we can kind of do a big overview of this tournament right now, July 20th, 2016, Korakuen Hall, Jushin Thunder Liger versus Eita, Super J-Cup. It's explaining the J-Cup, the 2016 J-Cup now is so hard to do. I cannot express to people, if they weren't there, how important the tournament felt when it was announced. And how even after the first night of the tournament, because they did 2 nights, one in Korakuen and then one in Differ Ariake in the finals, the first show is a very good pro wrestling show. It wasn't as good as 1994 or 1995. Very good pro wrestling show. The second night of that tournament is such a disaster. It is such a hated show. And it is hated for reasons that are entirely just. It is so weird the way that this tournament is remembered. But Eita versus Liger, J-Cup, Korakuen Hall, Mike, I did a whole podcast on this with WH Park years ago for his Thunderstruck series. I will pass it to you because this was a ginormous deal when it happened.
Yeah, and it felt like when this getting announced after years of, Super J-Cup 5th stage was in 2009, but that was a Noah thing, and that was all kind of based around making sure Marufuji got his, basically. This one felt like a more accurate representation of the Japanese wrestling landscape. Like,
yes.
let me run through all the participants of this show and think about this in 2024 eyes, who all were in this show. You had Bushi, Daisuke Harada, Eita, Gurrican Mask, Jushin Thunder Liger, Kaiji Tomato, Kano, Kushida, Matt Sydal, Ryusuke Taguchi, Taichi, Taiji Shimori, Titan, Will Ospreay, Yoshinobu Kanemaru, and Yuma Aoyagi. That is, like in 2024 eyes, that is a veritable who's who of junior heavyweight wrestling in the 2010s of Japan, I would say.
And Ishimori versus Kushida was like a huge match. That was the top Noah Junior against the top New Japan Junior. It was the first time that I think any of us had heard of Gurrican Mask. It was the first time that a lot of us had heard of Kaiji Tomato. It was right when Ospreay was like really becoming a talking point in a big deal. I mean, this is post Ricochet, the Super Juniors match, so he's happening at this point. The albatross of this tournament is Taichi. And I, to this day, 9 years later, have a bias against Taichi because of this tournament. And it's the second round, the Ariake Coliseum show. He beats Liger by countout in the second round of this tournament. And the match fucking sucks. It's 3 minutes. It ends in a countout. And it's the worst 3 minutes imaginable. And that is really what colored this tournament with a negative lens. But this Korakuen show, this is a big deal, and this was a ton of fun.
Yeah, and of course, being like the Dragon Gate homer at that point, I was like, oh yeah, Liger should lose to Eita, and Eita should basically have Taichi's patch. Like the first person I thought that Eita should lose to was Kushida in the semifinals, and how quickly I was disabused by the power of the briefcase.
Yeah, no, not a good tournament for Dragon Gate fans, because, I mean, Eita, at the time, Eita's coming off of King of Gate, where he has the Susumu match and the two Tozawa matches, because there's not only the Korakuen one, but there's the Hakata Starlanes tiebreaker match. And he's in the Brave Gate scene, and you did a great job a minute ago mentioning how important the Brave Gate division felt at the time. And then he has this Liger match. And so the way we analyzed Eita for the rest of his Dragon Gate career is through the lens of what could have been, because he was great when he came back from Mexico in 2013. 2014, he's in one of the best tag teams in the world that year. He's got all these great matches with T-Hawk. 2016 is this time where Eita felt like he could have been a transcendent Dragon Gate star who not only could have been a top guy in Dragon Gate, but could have gone and done a best of the Super Juniors. And if Dragon Gate was going to get back into America, you'd want to send him. And, he was this amazing, likable babyface wrestler, which is relevant because he would spend, starting in 2017, the rest of his Dragon Gate career as a heel, but he was this incredibly exciting and energetic babyface wrestler. And although it's not the best match of his career, I think his career will be largely defined by this Liger match. I think it's his most well-known and most respected match.
Right. And I feel like we all got so accustomed to like, oh, this is going to be Eita's breakout year. And this is going to be Eita really like I remember at the time calling this Eita getting his groove back, because there was all like the history and like the downcycling and unhappiness that was happening in 2014, 2015 with him. That
him getting publicly embarrassed, and T-Hawk in the same front, getting publicly embarrassed by CIMA, who, despite how hard the millennials were getting pushed, CIMA openly on the microphone being like, what is up with you guys? Why can't you talk? Where's your charisma? You guys are going to be running this place one day. You need to step up. And T-Hawk and Eita not necessarily answering the call when it was challenged by to them.
Yeah, and also I feel like it's saying that if we want to look at the show the way it is, we have to talk about how in 2016 it felt like that they were about to rebound and really kind of put Eita back, or put T-Hawk. Was like, okay, we've done it once with him, and we're used to this now in Dragon Gate, where you have the young guy going first. They get their first big push. They're going to lose. The only person who at that time that won their first ever Dreamgate match was Yamato, and then you're going to get cycled right back. So it was such a big thing, like for the time of essentially CIMA begging T-Hawk to finally step up, and they would try and they would try again, and then eventually, he would leave the company, and it was like, what was all that effort for in the first place?
But again, it goes back to the Yamato promo in King of Gate that year, where it's, we're in good hands. We have Shimizu and T-Hawk and Eita, and Ishida and Yamamura are on the way, and everything is going to be okay. And that is really relevant to the class of 2016 and their growth. We go to the Wrestling Observer newsletter, July 25th, 2016. Dave notes that Cedric Alexander, Kota Ibushi, Mascara Dorada, and Akira Tozawa have all been offered contracts and are believed to be headed in, as well as the 45-year-old Yoshihiro Tajiri. Mike, this Tozawa news, I am famous for being a denier. When it was rumored that Kenta was going to leave Noah, I said there's no way this is going to happen. He's a Noah lifer. When Nakamura was rumored to leave New Japan, I said there's no way this is going to happen. He's a New Japan lifer. And when it was rumored that Tozawa would leave Dragon Gate, I said there's no way this is going to happen. Tozawa is a Dragon Gate lifer. And then by July of that year, and that's worth noting, July of that year, it is known that Tozawa is on his way out.
Yeah, at least for me, I felt like it was... At the time, if I said like no, there was a thought in the back of my head going like, no, Tozawa's probably going. Like, it just because of his unique excursion, really. Like, he is the one guy that went over to America and fell in love with America. So I always had in the back of my mind that Tozawa was going to try to find ways back in America, and he would do so even after the excursion, making random PWG appearances during Dragon Gate's dead period. But
that's right.
I thought that for him, it was this... The one that I was like, oh, it was not going to happen was Kota Ibushi. Like, that was the one I was like, do we think Kota Ibushi is actually going to go to WWE? I never believed it. And I turned out to be right.
You ended up being right. And although not a lot of people would call Ibushi smart in 2025, credit to him and Zack Sabre Jr. for being the ones that saw through the mirage that was the Cruiserweight Classic.
Hey, Zack Sabre Jr. basically got a visa out of this and used it to work Gabe shows and PWG, which I have to say, one of the great political masterworks of all time.
Fantastic. Yeah, fantastic guy. August 6, 2016, we go to Shinjuku Face for the first show of the Summer Adventure Tag League. Opening match on that show was Cyber Kong, Mandai Ryu, and Shingo Takagi against Masato Yoshino, T-Hawk, and Futa Nakamura. Again, everybody at this time, very, very excited that we had more Nakamura making tape. Also on this show was an 8-man tag with Genki Kanda, Fujii, and Masaaki Mochizuki beating the Overgeneration group of Dragon Kid, Eita, Gamma, and Punch Tamanaga. And after that match, and this comes from the iHeart DG translations, this says, Gamma yelled at Punch Tamanaga after his loss. He took a long time off. In that time, Futa Nakamura debuted and is already in the tag league. Eita won the Brave Gate. What exactly did Tamanaga do during that time? Based on his physique, Gamma had a pretty good idea. He should be ashamed of himself to be out here in this state. Eita was a little bit more diplomatic. He talked about that weirdo Lindemann and his situation with Maria. Eita needs allies like Tamanaga if he was going to be fighting battles with enemies like that. He hoped Tamanaga could get his act together. Now, this is relevant. Go ahead.
I would like to take us back to Kobe World, where Punch Tamanaga notoriously played the theme music during Yamato's show close promo. There was a lot of heat on Punch Tamanaga at this point.
I forgot about that, but you're right. This is worth noting for two reasons. One, we're already drawing comparisons of guys that debuted before Nakamura, with them saying, hey, Nakamura's doing this, what are you doing? The other thing that's worth noting is, unless I'm missing something, and it could very easily be a case where, you know, we don't have translations on iHeartDG like we used to. Now we have the English commentary, which translates in real time. But otherwise, maybe Jay sends out a note here and there. But by and large, we don't get translations like we used to. This sort of public embarrassment, public shaming promo seems to have gone away from Dragon Gate post-split. Am I correct in that thought process, Mike?
Yeah, I think you're right. Yeah, it's notable here.
I mean, it's Punch Tamanaga who's always going to take a beating, but Gamma being like, you suck, Eita's better than you, and also you're fat and out of shape. What's going on with you? It could be the roster just being a little bit more responsible, but also that thing just doesn't really seem to happen anymore.
No, it really doesn't. And I think that you look at who's there and who's not, as you just said, and that's really telling you like the tenor of the promos that would happen during this feud. Who would no surprise that Osaka and Roke are like the biggest assholes, like being quite like blunt and honest about it. And yeah, this is a little bit of our Overgeneration podcast where even at this point in August of 2016, it was clear that Overgeneration was a dead unit. They needed to get everyone away from it at this point.
And yet they would last another year.
They would last another 2 years, Case. They would go until after the split.
You're right.
Yeah, because Mandai Ryu was in the loser disbands match that happened after everyone went to Shanghai.
Not good. Not good. What is good is on the evening show, the second Shinjuku Face show, there was a dark exhibition match. This did not make tape, but HYO Watanabe and Katsumi Takashima wrestled in an exhibition match. That was the good. The bad news that came out after the show was that Fuji Nakamura possibly suffered a concussion due to the beating that he received from Shingo Takagi on the afternoon show. According to iHeartTG, this says he still wanted to fight on the evening show, but was pulled as a precaution. He would be re-examined to determine his status going forward. CIMA told the fans to direct their disappointment directly at Takagi, and this left Over Generation at a disadvantage for their match. This ended up leading to Jushin Thunder Ichikawa coming out. That was all very fun, but the win was taken out of the sales of the entire tournament when Nakamura went out with a concussion.
Yeah, that's right. When we talk about how cursed Yamato's 2016 run started, you have to talk about how Summer of Eita Tag League just completely pulled all focus away from him. And because we were all excited about Fuda Nakamura, and then we got the kick in the pants that Fuda Nakamura got injured before he even had his first tournament match.
That's right. On August 12th, there was Prime Zone 45, and there is a Yamato, who is the Dreamgate champion at this point, Yamato versus Shun Watanabe singles match. I have this linked in the show description. My highest recommendation is that everybody watch this match. It fucking rocks. It is studio wrestling. Yamato as the Dreamgate champion versus a guy who had not debuted on a main show yet. It is awesome. That was August 12th. August 14th in Kobe, Jimmy Kanda and UT defeated Kness and Shun Watanabe. And then we had the HYO dark match. The Shun match was an exhibition, but HYO officially debuted. His debut was moved up a week to compensate for the continued absence of Futa Nakamura. And this is on the network. This will be linked in the show notes as well. CIMA, Takahiro Yamamura, and Kaito Ishida defeated Masato Yoshino, T-Hawk, and HYO Watanabe in his debut. In all of this, and this comes from iHeartDG, Yoshino introduced HYO to the fans. He noted his unusual name and that both he and Shun Watanabe had to have their names spelled out to avoid confusion. Yoshino asked him his age and his hometown. HYO said he is 19 and hails from Toyohashi City in the Aichi Prefecture. At this point, a single fan of the crowd shouted that they were also from there. Yoshino asked HYO if he knew them, but he did not. HYO thanked the fans for coming to see his debut. Today was the official start of his life as a wrestler, and he will fight his hardest to become great. And then Yoshino continued saying he was distressed at HYO being half his age. CIMA was further dismayed at the thought of HYO not even being 1 year old when he started wrestling. Yamamura and Ishida also addressed him. They both welcomed him to their ranks, and that they together would bring Dragon Gate into the future.
Do you think CIMA would have a great tight 15 minutes?
Yeah, fucking yeah, I do. She was probably hilarious.
I mean, hilarious and also incredibly mean.
Who's the CIMA stand-up comp?
Who is the CIMA stand-up comp? There's
is he Mark Maron before Maron got off cocaine?
Oh,
because he's kind of mean.
You see, I was going to go Bill Burr, but
I almost thought Burr.
Yeah, but Maron pre-cocaine, but pre-sobriety is a good comp there.
Again, he's a little mean, and Maron, even sober, is a little mean.
Yeah, but at least when he was on coke, it wasn't mean out of wanting to be back on drugs, kind of.
Yeah.
I mean, like, I'm not wrong in saying that Mark Maron, like, a lot of his stand-up was like, oh, I did sobriety kind of sucks.
Yes, yeah. Although I will say, as somebody who feels more and more distance from the world of stand-up, Maron's stand-up has gotten so good.
I haven't seen because he went into acting, but
I think he's a good actor too. Now, I'm also a shameless defender of Maron on IFC, one of my favorite television shows of all time. But
what's up, Abe Anthony? Yeah.
When he got the finale of Maron made me cry. That is a emotional TV show that last season because it just sort of deals with dealing with life in this very matter-of-fact, very Maron confrontational way that just it's a lot whenever I watch it. But no, his stand-up got really, really good.
Who would be the Andy Kendler of Dragon Gate?
Punch Tamanaga.
Yep, makes sense.
On August 20th in Okayama, Fuji Nakamura returned to the tag league and lost a match to Dragon Kid and Eita. On August 21st in Fukuoka, we would get an 8-man tag team match that was Big R Shimizu, Takahiro Yamamura, Kaito Ishida, and Shun Watanabe against Don Fuji, KZ, L. Lindemann, and HYO Watanabe. We would also get a B block Summer Adventure Tag League match of Shingo and Cyber Kong against Masaaki Mochizuki and Futa Nakamura. I will continue here on September 9th, 2016, Prime Zone 46, Akira Tozawa versus HYO Watanabe. That will be linked as well. That is a very fun match. September 10th in Osaka, we get Horiguchi, Kanda, and Saito against Yamamura, Ishida, Yamamura, and Watanabe. And then these guys make tape once again, September 22nd, 2016, Dangerous Gate, in an opening 8-man tag with Fuji, Lindemann, Nakamura, and Shun Watanabe against Gamma, Yamamura, Ishida, and HYO Watanabe. So we start seeing these guys more and more as we progress towards the end of 2016.
Yeah, and we're getting to a point where the Watanabes and Nakamura kind of become like a mini unit. It more happens in October into November, like which I called at the time W2N as like an M2K joke. But like it was always kind of a interesting thing because you would get big strapping Futa Nakamura, lanky Shun Watanabe, and scrawny HYO Watanabe, and it was always like kind of and HYO was always super tan too, so it was like, oh, the short tan guy, the big jack tan guy, and then like the lanky, not like pale, but like and then like the lanky guy. It was always kind of like a wild combination of rookies at that point.
I will note in my review of Dangerous Gate 2016 about this match, I said the following. I said, I can't go without mentioning L. Lindemann, no longer flanked by Maria. This is literally, Lindemann turns heel after this match. No longer flanked by Maria. He was brutal in this match, like a smaller version of Don Fuji. To boot was Futa Nakamura, who will probably be main eventing this show in 5 years. He's going to be a superstar.
You were 2 years late on that prediction.
I know, 2019 Dangerous Gate and 2021 Gate of Origin. So I was pretty damn close there.
Hey, there you go.
There you go. September 25th in Kobe, they're back on TV. This was Gamma, Yamamura, and Ishida versus Shun Watanabe, Don Fuji, and Futa Nakamura. And then a 3-minute L. Lindemann versus HYO Watanabe match in which Lindemann kept on beating up HYO after the match until Shun and Nakamura helped run him off. Lindemann then attacked Punch at the merchandise booth and battled with him backstage. Very fun.
The Linda heel turn, at least when it started, was so great because he turned into such a little prick.
It's, in a weird way, like, Hangman Page right now in AEW is unfortunately becoming like a cartoon version of Hangman Page, which I think is not helpful towards what they're doing with him. But with Lindemann, when he turned heel, they just turned it to 11 immediately, and he became this cartoon heel character that was like Bart Simpson on steroids, basically. And it was very fun in the beginning.
Yeah, and like Hangman, they gave him a rope.
That's right, they did. Also on this show, and this was the September 25th, 2016 Kobe Sambo Hall show. This was after Dangerous Gate, in which Tozawa challenged Yamato for the Dreamgate belt. Tozawa made it official on the 25th that he would be leaving Dragon Gate at Gate of Destiny in November.
And I never cared just as much about Dragon Gate.
Going through these notes, putting these together, I forgot, and I'm not going to go through the whole translation here because it's long and ultimately not super relevant, but I forgot that it wasn't just set that, hey, we're going to do this 6-man tag send-off with the big 6 guys. I forgot that Doi and Shingo
refused.
The heels at the time were fighting against that, and that whole thing just, it sucked. It just, no other way to describe it. They made Tozawa leaving the least enjoyable that it possibly could have been.
And in doing this, they tied up the Dreamgate champion with this. And I'm going to keep on going back to this. It completely killed all momentum Yamato had, because let's look at what Yamato did since winning the belt. He did Summer Adventure Tag League, did not have a good Summer Adventure Tag League because there really was no attention towards him. If I'm right, going off memory, there was DK and Eita winning the thing.
It was their tournament, but it wasn't a good tournament.
No,
it was kind of, it's the thing we talked about. Where after Kobe World, there we didn't know at the time that there was this shift that happened, but the story was in Yamato's chase, and they did everything right through Yamato winning the Dreamgate. And those Summer Adventure Tag League shows in Shinjuku Face, they feel like a hard reset because the story had been building to this Yamato title win. And so, and not to cut you off and derail your point, but it's a Summer Adventure Tag League that is just a lame tournament. It's not very good. And then you go into a Tozawa defense that is a lame duck Tozawa defense, because we all know that unless they're doing some weird Summer of Punk storyline, that Tozawa's not winning. And then it's the Gate of Destiny 6-man, which wasn't enjoyable in the way they got to it at all. And then it sucked because now Tozawa's leaving. And then the other thing, and I think we leave this out of the story, and it's really worth noting in terms of this big, long Yamato Dreamgate run and why it sucked so much, he defends the belt against Doi at Final Gate. And if you were going to tell me in 2025, hey, a show's going to be headlined by Yamato and Naruki Doi, all right, awesome, I'm in. But in 2016, Doi's reputation as a main event singles wrestler was entirely different than it is now. And it was different in a way that is not good towards Doi. And that match also wasn't any good. Doi had just turned babyface, so it was this weird...
He was hotter than Yamato.
He was hotter than Yamato, but it was one of those weird babyface versus babyface Dreamgate matches where the crowd is sort of split. Like it's not split like, hey, we want this guy to win, we want this guy to win. It's, hey, we're split on we don't know how to act necessarily. And so you really have 5 straight months of just sucky Yamato title defenses and title scenarios. And then after a defense against BB Hulk in February, he goes into 3 straight months of Cybercog. And then T-Hawk after that. So it's a whole year of just awfulness.
Yeah, and because of how it was set up, like, you could make an argument why, yeah, you say like the Summer of Tozawa would be the thing, but as we've seen in 2024, Dragon Gate's willing to grab other notoriety with their stars and push them for it. So Yamato was not a prohibitive favorite at Dangerous Gate 2016. He was not the prohibitive favorite at Final Gate 2016 because Doi was much more popular. And then you have him in the endless Cyberkong stuff. They kind of made it in a way where this was supposed to be like his big ace run, and now we're kind of seeing like it revisited now. But they set him up as an ace in every single title match. You can make a strong argument, other than Cyberkong, that the other person should win every single time.
I would concur with that. We'll go here. We'll skip ahead a little bit to the October 12th Korakuen show, because at this point now we're seeing pretty much every show that makes tape. Shun, HYO, and Nakamura are on. October 12th, 2016, Korakuen Hall. They do CIMA, Gamma, and Dragon Kid against Nakamura and then the 2 Watanabes. And this was like oh shit, like we're getting the 3 young guys against 3 veterans. That parlays into, on October 29th, we get another new guy. Yuki Yoshioka debuts. This is on the network. This will be linked below. The match, and this is just a fun blast from the past, it is Masaaki Mochizuki, Futa Nakamura, and Peter Kasa against Genki Horiguchi, Ryo Saito, and Yuki Yoshioka in his debut match. And then, before I throw it back to you here, Mike, Gate of Destiny 2016, we would get Nakamura, Watanabe, and Watanabe in the opening match, and they would beat Yamamura, Ishida, and Tamanaga.
Yeah, W2N was in full effect at this point, and it's a wild thing. Like, this fall of 2016, Peter Kasa is now a member of he goes from kind of being Over Generation affiliated into straight into Monster Express for like the last 2 months of it, and then he gets injured and does not participate in the Monster Express. It's a span match happens after Tozawa leaves.
That's right. No, I forgot he got hurt. So by this point, you're not only seeing these guys on every TV taping, but now they're beating Ishida and Yamamura in particular. And I think that's worth noting because, we're going to talk here about the December 2016 Korakuen show. And for those that know the timeline, Takahiro Yamamura's real push begins February 2017. For a variety of reasons, he and Shimizu have this incredible night in Korakuen, and they're stars from there. But 2016, and I remember this in real time, it wasn't an awesome year for Yamamura and Ishida. They felt like as soon as Nakamura came into the company, and then especially once Shun and HYO started making TV, that they were lapped and that they were in trouble. And that sort of, factors into what they would do at Final Gate, where you had this match that was Mochi Fujii versus Ishida and Yamamura, and Mochi Fujii killed them. I mean, it's as violent of a Don Fujii beatdown as there's ever been. I would highly recommend going back and watching that if you never have.
Yeah.
But pretty much immediately, as soon as the 2016 guys start the loop, they are positioned higher than Ishida and Yamamura.
Yeah. The Final Gate match is actually more violent than 12-1 2016.
Yes. No, the Final Gate match is disgusting.
Yeah. A lot of punching in the heads.
A lot of kicking. It's fucking brutal.
Yeah.
Also on Gate of Destiny, this is of course Akira Tozawa's last Dragon Gate show. During the farewells, Futa Nakamura noted that he only spent 6 months with Tozawa while training for his debut. The days that Tozawa was leading the drills were the hardest. He really hated running those 10-kilometer marathons, really hated it, but his stamina is better now, and he owes that to Tozawa. He will continue to practice as hard as he can, even with Tozawa gone. Shun said that he will miss the bright and funny Akira Tozawa, and he wished him luck in America. And then HYO thanked him for all that he taught him, and he hoped to one day be able to run like Tozawa can. Mike, can you explain Akira Tozawa's love of running for me, please?
He's the Sandma monster, and that's a legit thing. He, as soon as he got the go-ahead to start losing weight at a the Metabolic Brothers, he lost weight super fast because he was always kind of a slight guy. And when he got to the point of seniority, when he would start leading the dojos, he was known for like, hey guys, the one thing you really need to be able to do is not get gassed. And Tozawa and CIMA it's very funny. CIMA's mentality in the dojo was very similar to that, but Tozawa would just have everyone run in the drills. CIMA would be like, hey, let's act like we're doing a triathlon. Like, let's go bike riding, and then let's go swimming. Tozawa was just like, we're running a 10K today. That's what we're doing. Yeah,
so especially at that time, and I should probably check in on this, but because I think it's changed a little bit, but especially at the time, like it's this weird thing in Dragon Gate, and I don't know why this is, but people will credit Shisa and Kness as these trainers,
Takakura.
And that was this was always one of my hangups with the Nozawa stuff, and then the Kaito Ishida stuff. Was people were saying like, oh, well, Kaito Ishida left because he's like Kness and Super Shisa had his back in the dojo. And it's like, well, those guys hadn't been in the dojo in forever. Well, what happened especially
Kness
at this
lives
time,
in Tokyo.
Yeah. What happened especially at this time is almost every day you would have a new veteran come in and they would guide the class through, with Tozawa it was running, with CIMA it was like this multi-discipline sort of workout. With Dragon Kid, it was all upper body strength and weird handstand exercises and things that only Dragon Kid can do. And everybody sort of had their own flavor to it. And Tozawa, and I've heard this from multiple people that cross paths in Dragon Gate while Tozawa was there, was all about making people run until they couldn't anymore.
Which I feel like is kind of, I mean, I am Tozawa's biggest proponent. I think that's reflective of the treatment he got in 2004 and 2005.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
like
that would make sense.
That's people traumatizing others.
So we go to the November 10th Korakuen Hall show, and this is super important because before the second match on the show, Kikuchi introduced the class of 2016, and they formally introduced themselves to the crowd with their new characters. Yuki Yoshioka went first. He only recently debuted, but his goal was to be no less than the best wrestler in Dragon Gate. Katsumi Takashima appeared and said that he received his official debut date and he will do his best to show off his abilities. Shun Watanabe became the masked fighter Shun Skywalker, and he was going to spread his wings and fly high over the Dragon Gate ring. Futa Nakamura became Benkei. The name is a play on the Japanese word Benkai, which means powerful person. His unbelievable power will help him reign supreme. And HYO Watanabe decided to keep his name. His name also means leopard in Japanese, so he adopted leopard print ring gear. He is the smallest of the new class, but he knows he is the best, and he will move like a leopard and promised to become the Brave Gate champion. This led to Eita coming out and saying, hey, if you want to become the Brave Gate champion, why don't you wrestle me right now? Eita at the time was the Brave Gate champion. So they had a singles match there. And then afterwards, Eita congratulated HYO on his coming out party. Eita said that Dragon Gate was a rough place, but the most important thing was not to lose confidence. He hoped that he would achieve his goal one day of being the Brave Gate champion, but that wasn't going to happen today because Eita remained the measuring stick.
Yeah, so I think this is time to talk about the rookie gimmicks.
Let's do it.
So Benkei is also the phrase Benkai comes from a historical mythological figure in Japanese culture named Benkai, who was like known as the guy who he was going to kill and defend his daimyo, and his goal was to collect 1,000 swords from fallen fighters. And instead, when he was going for his 1,000th sword, he faced off against someone that was using archery, and it's been said that Benkei, the historical figure, did not fall even though he was riddled with arrows. So he's seen like as like this really like faithful, powerful person. Shun Skywalker is though like the big albatross of this, and I think that this colors at least the first 6 months of Shun Skywalker. His gear was awful. He had a mask that you could see his face in. It a Teneblas like mask. And most importantly, and because of me being me, I fixated the most on this, his bodysuit and mask, Kelly green. His boots and his gloves, neon green.
Yep.
And then Hyo just wore leopard print Converse, which I was always like afraid he was going to break his ankle in.
He's like Bill Russell.
Yeah, like he wore
strenuous
those
athletic
Converse.
activity in Converse.
Yeah, he wore the Converse up until his heel turn.
That's right. So on this show, it goes Eita Hyo, and then the next match was Kagetora and Susumu against Ben-K and Shun Skywalker. I wrote in my review at the time, this match ruled. If the prior match felt like the opening match to a Dragon Gate SmackDown, then this was the main event. Perfectly tame, not a match of the year contender, but packed full of action, heart, and heat. This Ben-K kid, the former Futa Nakamura, is on another planet. He is better than 2004 Shingo Takagi. He's better than 2015 Kazusada Higuchi. This is a superstar in the making. He'll probably end up leading his own unit in 5 years. My only issue with him now is that he looks less impressive, and it's quite literally because we can't see his thighs. He is wearing Hiroki Goto cosplay attire instead, and that is a bummer. This was a thing. Nakamura putting on baggy pants at the time. I remember people at the time being very bummed out by this.
Yeah. And then the weird thing was that then he went back to shorts finally when he turned heel.
And it worked out because he turned heel and won a Dream Gate belt shortly after that. But he did that in baggy pants, I guess. But no, Ben and Shun versus the Jimmies here. I can't find this show. This is like the one show from this era that I have no record of anywhere. I remember this match. I gave it 3 3/4 in my review, being completely blown away by Ben taking it up a level from not just doing like opening match power spots now. In Shun, I mean, we had only seen this guy as a Black Trunks young boy. And then he came into this match with the ridiculous gear that I do bury in my review. But, oh my God, Shun came out and it completely changed the perception of look, nobody was on Ben-K's level at this time, but it became very clear that Shun was a level above Hyo in the ring, and that was very, very exciting.
Yeah, and it was interesting because this was the way they were able to differentiate the two, especially with Hyo being like 5'3" and Shun being lanky and technically never being able to be in the Brave Gate division. I did take note of where his weight was during this time. He never qualified for the Brave Gate. He was always above 83 kilos.
That's interesting. I would have not put that together in real time.
Yeah, I mean, he just was he just was too lanky for that. But it was really kind of remarkable. It's worth noting, we've glossed over him a little bit. Katsumi Takashima was in the dojo for years. He was someone that had persistent eye problems, and I think he was in the dojo as he might have been a compatriot of Shimizu's, actually, like that far back. So like this, like the like Chihiro Punch Tominaga was one of the people that, stuck around, everyone saw for a while, and eventually made it to the roster. Similarly, Daiki Yanagiuchi, like you had that happening at that.
And so let's talk about Takashima some more, because this Korakuen again, it went Eita Hyo and then Jimmy's versus Ben and Shun, and then there was a quick CIMA Mondai Ryu match, and after that match, CIMA got on the microphone, and again, this comes from iHeartDG, in which it says, CIMA imparted some advice onto the 5 rookies. Today, a new chapter of Dragon Gate begins. Today, they are in Korakuen Hall. Korakuen Hall is a special place. Matches in Korakuen Hall have a special kind of pressure. If you mess up here, you don't get a second chance. 20 years ago, CIMA was in their position, a rookie with aspirations of being the best. Welcome to Dragon Gate. The current generation, the next generation, the old generations, and now their generation. They all have doors to open. He offered a handshake to Hyo, but Hyo slapped his hand away. They backed CIMA to the ropes. CIMA attempted to remain defiant while clearly terrified. He challenged them to a 10-man tag next month with him, Mochizuki, Gamma, Dragon Kid, and Don Fujii. And thus, Katsumi Takashima's fate was sealed. His debut match would be December 1st, 2016 in Korakuen Hall with him and his fellow class of 2016 rookies against the 5 veteran elder statesmen of the Dragon system by that point.
Yeah, and it's worth noting before we get into talking about 12-1-16, if you watch the version that Case is getting put up, that he will put up there, you do get to see this angle happen in the pre-show. Like they do, well, like when I'm blanking on his name, Ishikawa, the announcer, runs down the show. I think he's with like like Masato Yoshino with this, they go through this angle, so you do get to see this if you're watching this 12/1 2016 upload.
And I think, the word that Jay uses there is an apt one, where this was being positioned as, yes, these were rookies against veterans, but CIMA was really taken aback by the way that HYO didn't sort of bow down to CIMA in this angle, and he does look terrified. And it becomes, and you'll see it in the match, we'll talk about it here in just a second, but the rookies are fighting for their lives, but they're so, for lack of a better term, feral in the way that they fight the veterans, that the veterans also feel like their backs are up against the wall a little bit.
Right, and you have like the idea that Mochi Fujii kind of at this point were off doing their own thing, and over generation clear babyface unit is now reuniting with like these veterans, like 3 years after the last We Are Team veteran. I'm trying to remember when that breakup
2014,
happened.
so 2 years.
So 2 years after that, and you're getting to see this, and it was, and by this time, the fan base was well conditioned to know, like, oh, we're seeing like a team veteran thing happen.
Yep. So that takes us to December 1st, 2016. We are in Korakuen Hall. Mike, let's do this. Let's save the 10-man tag for last. We both watched this entire show, and I think we have brief thoughts on pretty much everything we saw, with extended thoughts on that 10-man tag. So let's go top to bottom here, or I'm sorry, opening match to main event, and briefly discuss a show that feels woefully out of date in 2025 eyes.
Yeah, and I would say that rewatching this in 2025, you very clearly see that the drama that would happen in 2017 and 2018, it is happening. Like we are like counting down to that, and it was clear that the cracks in the foundation were strongly there at that time.
It's just a promotion that feels like they don't have any compelling narratives outside of the rookies. And this is something that isn't revisionist history. I mean, going into this show, your main event is Lindemann, Shingo, and T-Hawk against the newly babyfaced Naruki Doi and Kotoka and Masato Yoshino. They would form Maximum, but it's not Maximum officially yet at this point. I wasn't into that. And we're post Monster Express, and Tozawa's gone, and Ishida and Yamamura aren't lighting the world on fire. The most interesting thing in this promotion at the time were the rookies. And as they would progress throughout 2017, each of their matches would be less special because we were seeing more and more of them, but nothing else on the card was really pulling its weight. And so you just enter this very drab period, if not actively bad period of the promotion. And it's the thing that I always know when I talk to lapsed fans is, if their reasoning is, well, I just liked it when CIMA was around and Shingo was around and Tozawa was around. I get it. But the last 2 full years of CIMA and Shingo specifically being around were not good years for the promotion. I think looking at this show and comparing it to what we have in 2025, what we saw in 2024, I think the promotion is stronger top to bottom now than it was in 2016 with the roster that was on this show.
Yeah, and I think you have to look at the heel unit. The second generation of Berserk is such a step down from the 2015 edition that even though I have like thrown roses at Lindemann's heel turn, you get T-Hawk who basically who turns on Monster Express in their disbands match and just steps right into Berserk a year after he refuses Shingo Takagi. And they're going up against a Doyoshi reunion that everyone was kind of tentative about because we're like, is this going to be the real thing? Is this happening? Are we going to actually go with Doyoshi a third time? And while that was happening, the rest of the roster, you have Jimmy's who were not stale, but they were kind of reaching that point where it was like it was clear that that 2017 was probably going to be the last year of the Jimmy's at that point. And Tri Vanguard, your on paper babyface new face unit has been hamstrung by the booking of your Dreamgate champion, and then the rest of the members of the unit. Hulk is still kind of tentative. Maria's coming off her peak, and KZ has finally is only right now hitting the gym basically.
And UT is a complete non-factor in there as well, because now you could look at Natural Vibes and go, oh, well, they have UT, but UT in 2025 means something different than UT in 2016.
Right. Yeah. I mean, this is deep, and the UT's too injured to be on shows.
I mean, I think the presumption was that he would just fade away at some point.
Right. Yeah. No. And especially you think about 8 years of him getting through that. You have that happening, and you have like this thing where Shimizu is right about to break out, and he is kind of like he's kind of floating around as like the top free agent. And when Big R Shimizu is your top free agent, unaffiliated guy, because you already know Doyoshi are doing their thing, does not really provide a lot of intrigue. I'd say.
Remind me, does Shimizu, does he go to Maximum
Yes,
from
he does.
this? Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yep. He is like the last member of Maximum to join out of that initial 5.
And then Jason joins later. Because, I mean, that's when you get into 2017 and 2018, when those cards would be released, I would just look to see what Maximum was doing. And I would hope that all of those guys were in interesting matches, because that was really the only interesting thing to me happening, especially once Yamamura got hurt for the first time in mid-2017. Then it really became, let's hope that Maximum aren't wrestling some combination of like Kanda, Cyber Kong, and Punch, because as long as they're in a decent-looking match, it'll end up being a really good match. But just comparing things to Kobe World from 2016, it's like, all right, Yamato stock is down. Hulk is a non-factor. Ishida and Yamamura, their stock is down because they're now being publicly kind of called disappointments. KZ had been a Brave Gate champion by this point, but he wasn't doing anything of consequence in 2016. Shimizu feels less important than he did in the summer. Eita, coming off of all the things we talked about. Why did we talk about that? Because by December, Eita feels a little directionless, a little like, okay, he had the Lindemann feud, and it was clear by this point that he wasn't going to get elevated, but he also was done with the Brave Gate belt, and so you just had him wasting away an overgeneration. And then you had this Berserk that was a T-Hawk push that I don't think really excited anybody, a Lindemann push that was hamstrung by the fact that T-Hawk was getting pushed harder than him, and Takagi, for being as great as he was, we were kind of at the end of Takagi being a really interesting heel in Dragon Gate.
Right, and I think all of that makes a Berserk unit that, I mean, you talk about its first year, and I know, Case, how highly you place him. You place that unit, it becomes like a bastardized kind of thing that's like Shingo and whatever geeks he has running with him at that point. And Shingo's just kind of this outsized presence that feels awkward. Like, if I wonder what would have happened if things were kind of in a better spot, or at least powers that be would be a lot more understanding and let him kind of go more freelance in 2016. I think that would have probably been a long-term better situation for the heel unit versus him just looming omnipresent as he has these geeks around to me.
Okay, well, let's do this then. Let's start with the main event, because I have a point to make off of that I think is interesting. So the main of the show, it was Lindemann, Shingo, and T-Hawk against Kotoka, Yoshino, and Doi. This is the Doi Yoshi reunion, first time since 2013. They're not Maximum yet, but we all sort of thought they were going to become a unit sooner rather than later. I remember there being talk at the time of two different things. One of, it's time to turn Shingo babyface. He was so aggressive and so violent in 2015 and through the summer of 2016 that even though he just turned, it kind of felt like, all right, we're ready to cheer for this guy again, but also we just need a break. And then the counterpoint being, he was too violent and aggressive. Nobody's going to cheer for this guy again. And that is sort of the position that Shingo found himself in, is he became too big for his own promotion. You're right. Him going freelance in 2017 and working basically what Eita ended up doing the last few years of him in Dragon Gate, that part-time schedule, I think that would have alleviated a lot of pressure around Shingo.
That's right, because you look at this match, you have Shingo, very intense, El Lindemann, as we've said, basically being a chaotic hyena at this point. Those two work well in concert. I've always kind of liked Shingo and Linda together. Mm-hmm. T-Hawk, though, is just the exact same T-Hawk that you... the only difference is that he is technically a heel. Like, there's no real difference between T-Hawk and Monster Express, T-Hawk and Millennials, and T-Hawk and Berserk.
And I'm somebody that adores Millennials era T-Hawk and really likes Monster Express era T-Hawk. Now, Monster Express era T-Hawk, there was nothing interesting about him, but he was wrestling with Doi, or I'm sorry, not with Doi, but with Shimizu and with Yoshino, and he had good guys around him in a promotion where at the time the work rate was so high that he was constantly having good matches. This heel turn is so uninteresting, and they just put their heads down and plow through it. It's amazing. And now we know, because of Yamato's promo from Kobe World this past year, where this is around the time that T-Hawk takes control of the dojo and is, kicking the shit out of all of these class of 2016 guys. And so he's an albatross on the screen. And I think you start to feel that, especially as 2017 progresses and you have this really, really lame, really cold Kobe World 2017 main event with Yamato and T-Hawk. And then behind the scenes, you have this guy who is Shima's boy, but is sort of making a mess of the dojo. And it makes all the sense in the world why 2018 happened the way that it did, and with benefit of hindsight.
Yeah, and then it makes sense that the OWE experience starts that fall of 2017, because at that point, it's very clear what sides are happening here, especially the power of hindsight and covering OWE the way I did. Like, it was very clear that there was a line here that was already well crossed, and it just was uncomfortable. And I feel like that was the vibe of this. The match, the best part of the match for me was El Lindemann versus Kotoka. I thought they were great together. I'm bummed we never got a prolonged Kotoka versus El Lindemann program.
That's a good point. This is, Kotoka kind of had this year-long stretch from about the end of 2015 to around this time where I can only phrase it like this. He was doing shockingly great work considering who he was. And you're right, he is far and away the star of this main event.
I think, like, you had this thing where, like, he becomes kind of like the last member of Millennials, and it's kind of like, oh yeah, no, I was born in 1990. I'm technically one of y'all. And he comes out of the Millennials feud going straight into, I'm not going to say it as loud as I can, but the Kotoka. And that became a legit thing. And I think that with the fact that Kotoka, a lot like UT, not a healthy guy throughout his career. I mean, he would have to retire early in 2018 because of neck injuries. But it was very clear, though, that, like, this was kind of the run of his career happening in real time. And you would notice that if you're someone who just was day in, day out Dragon Gate, considering what Kotoka was basically up until he joined Millennial.
You mentioned health here. This is the other thing I want to bring up, next to Shingo possibly being a freelancer at the time, is Masato Yoshino has his serious spinal injury on January 23rd, 2017. So this is, and I don't mean this in a morose way, but this is one of the last matches we have on tape where Yoshino isn't on death watch, basically. It's a completely different era of Masato Yoshino than what we would end with. And the other thing, and I've brought this up before, I forget what we were talking about, but I remember the prevailing thought at the time being, okay, Doi has turned on Yoshino countless times. Doi is now coming from being a heel to turn face. He's going to team with Yoshino. And there was a thought that Yoshino would be the one to turn heel and that Yoshino would start a heel unit. But we never got to see it because Yoshino got hurt in January. Do you remember that discourse at the time?
Oh, yeah. That was, like, right in the offing. Everyone thought that this would be the time that Yoshino would turn on Doi, and then whatever Berserk would become would be Yoshino led.
Yep. Yeah, that was the thought at the time. I would love to know. It's, I've got kind of an ongoing list of unanswerable Dragon Gate questions, and that is very high on the list of, was that the plan? Or was it maybe, maybe it was like KZ in 2021 where we all thought he was going to turn heel because he relaunched Vibes, and then he just went to Natural Vibes instead.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And I think, though, with the power of hindsight, they could not have afforded to turn Yoshino heel because you needed to have that nice Doi Yoshi moment for what would happen in 2017, 2018.
Yeah, that is true. We certainly didn't see the down the barrel of what 2018 was at that point in time. The other issue is, okay, let's say you turn Yoshino heel and just keep the heel unit as is with Yoshino. Now you're really lacking strong baby faces because you're the Jimmies at this point. It's like 2004 Crazy Max. There's nothing wrong with them, but they're tired. It's an act that had feuded with everybody possible, and we had seen what it was. And this is one thing, like if Yoshino turns heel, but Tozawa is around, I think you can get away with Yoshida turning heel because Tozawa
Yeah.
is a strong enough babyface.
And
I
it
don't
was
even-
Tozawa's time to get the title anyway.
Exactly. There wouldn't have been, unless they were really going to go in with Yamamura or Shimizu. There wouldn't have been anybody strong enough on the babyface side, I don't think, to challenge Yoshino, and that would have created its own set of issues.
Yeah, and it's just like you had these 5 guys who were starting off their career that they would become so important over this, because like you said you would clue into whatever Maximum was going in. I still have, and I might need to bring out since it's back, Mochizuki Dojo in 2017 became the thing that kept me going.
That's true. That was the other thing but that was, I mean, again, that was, rookies, that was the whole gimmick. But you're right. That was the other thing in 2017 and 2018 was Shun, Yoshioka, Minoru when he joined up. That stuff was all super exciting, but it was, the problem is that it wasn't the main events. The Dream Gate scene was dire. The Twin Gate scene was uninteresting. It was, let's hope that there's like a cool 6-man tag with Yoshino, Shimizu, and Jason Lee. And then also let's see what Mochizuki is doing with these rookies.
So I forgot, Mochizuki Dojo doesn't happen until after the split. I thought it was 2017. It starts in 2018.
Yeah, that's because 2017, in terms of the class of 2016, which we'll get back to here in just a second because this podcast is about the class of 2016, but Ben joins Maximum, gets pushed pretty heavily. HYO falls by the wayside pretty quickly. Yoshioka and Shun are doing opening match duty where they're clearly the stars of the opening matches. I've talked about this a million times. Every big show in 2017, Korakuen and then your pay-per-views, it felt like there was an 8-man tag with Shun Skywalker where the entire match was built around Shun doing a moonsault to the floor onto everybody, and that was pretty much his entire 2017.
Yeah, no, that's right.
And then he doesn't really do anything of note until he does the tag league in All Japan with Mochizuki in 2018. But that's a story for another time. Also on the show, Eita and Big R Shimizu versus Kagetora and Saito. This was a fine little tag match, but nothing special in 2025 eyeballs.
Other than seeing 2016 Eita, really.
It was a nice look at what could have been. That is Eita's entire career. When he retires, I will write the article titled "What Could Have Been: The Story of Eita."
Yeah, next year we might want to do the Summer of Eita rewind.
That is a good idea. Pencil that in. That's good. I like that. Cyber Kong versus KZ on this show. Cyber Kong won. It was super depressing to watch.
Yeah, and KZ was this. This is actually right before KZ gets into good shape.
Mm-hmm.
Because he comes back after the winter break in 2017, and CIMA goes, "Oh, you have abs now."
KZ had a viciously 2016 man bun in this match.
Yeah, gosh, yeah. Great. I do think he has some all-time good looks, but I don't know about this Tri Vanguard before he got in good shape look, to be honest.
The whole Tri Vanguard thing sucked. Nobody ever looked good in that unit other than like UT at the very end.
I mean, Kai. UT and Kai looked good.
No, great tag team. There was a singles match on this show, Kaito Ishida and Takahiro Yamamura. Mike, I want to throw it to you for your thoughts on this match before I give mine.
I think with like 2024 eyes or 2025 eyes, I'm looking at your review right now.
Mm-hmm.
I was a lot kinder to it. I was still 2.5 stars on it. It was not great. Ishida really was not there whatsoever. Takahiro Yamamura looks like, hey, it seems like the spring of 2017 will be a big spring of 2017 for Takahiro Yamamura. But Ishida is just like, he's there. Like that's how I feel about Kaito Ishida basically up until he joins Maximum. He's there. He won it for Hurricane Kick. He should have done the Hurricane Kick as a finish further on into his career rather than doing the locomotion suplexes. Yeah,
there's so Mike is referencing my review, which in real time I gave this match 1 3/4 stars. I bumped it up to 2 3/4 on Rewatch for this one.
Okay, that's about where I was at 2.5. So yeah,
it's a match that has no transitions. They really do not know how to work a compelling singles match at this point in time. Yamamura would do a spot and it would look good, and then nothing would happen. And
Ishida would sell his knee because he had a bad knee right then.
And then Ishida would do a kick, and then he'd sell the knee, and then another spot. It's a match that is a mess, and it looks like guys in over their heads. And given what would follow 2 matches later on this show, it's so incredible to watch, because even though the veterans versus young boys match is a structure where the young boys, could do more traditional young boy style, which is very pleasing for whatever reason, Yamamura and Ishida tried to have like a grown-up style match, and they failed miserably. And given that it was this show, it makes Yamamura's 2017 and then Ishida's success later on from 2019 to 2021, it makes it so remarkable, because their careers, and I don't mean this in any sort of exaggeration, their careers could have been over on this night. The spot that Yamamura was given in February of 2017 could have gone to Ben, or could have gone to Shun, or could have gone to Yoshioka, and Yamamura could have been completely passed by. And Ishida, who for 5 years there I loved, he took so long to get going that it's remarkable that he got a shot in the first place. He's a result of the chaos that it was around him, and the fact that he outlasted so many people that left, that gave him a shot at anything. And then once he had that shot, he really made the most of it up until his departure in 2022.
Yeah, and really, like, thinking about this match and like how it was kind of portrayed, like, you could very easily see 2016 Kaito Ishida get kicked to the wayside and just working like Kaintai Dojo at that
completely
point. Yeah,
completely.
The opener was fun though.
Opener was fun. It was very long. My takeaway was that Dragon Gate doesn't normally have opening matches that are this long anymore.
Yeah, no, this one was 13 minutes. Like, looking at the runtime on the show, you also see Saitoism kind of like through the eyes, like, oh, only match that was under 10 minutes was Cyber Kong and KZ. Everything else was, Kaito Ishida and Takahiro Yamamura, practically 10:59, 11 minutes, 13 and a half minutes for the opener, 17 minutes for the 10-man, 16 minutes for the tag, and then 23 minutes for the main event. You wouldn't even have, like, on a random cork in a 23-minute main event nowadays.
No, and I think that's a flaw of the promotion. I think we have enough evidence now to say that there are a lot of big matches in current Dragon Gate that need more time than what they get. But watching this show and just sort of sitting down and, not having watched any of these matches other than the 10-man since they happened, this is certainly not a show that I've revisited other than the one match, sitting down going, okay, I'm going to watch a Dragon Gate Korakuen, and kind of at the 6-minute mark going like, oh, it's still going. Oh, 12 minutes, still going. It's kind of shocking in the way that this match is presented compared to your modern day Dragon Gate opening match.
Yeah, it's really kind of remarkable. You do get to see Maria still kind of towards her peak, which I think was really kind of fun with it. And Tribe Vanguard just is an awkward and bad unit. Like, in retrospect, when we finally do our units rankings, I think I might stun people with how lowly I put Tribe Vanguard. But, and you have that in comparison to like the Jimmies, who are still incredibly over. Like, that's the one thing about Jimmies. Like, they reached the end of their lifespan, but they never were a drag with that.
Susumu's pretty awesome in this opener. It's just kind of a good reminder of like, oh yeah, he's the best.
That finishing stretch with him and Maria. Yeah.
No, he's
fighting over the Naralucci towards the end.
He's the best.
Yeah, great dude.
That takes us, Mike, to the class of 2016, their showcase match, 10-man tag. This was, of course, the match that was Shima, Dragon Kid, Gamma, Masaaki Mochizuki, and Don Fujii against Ben K, Shun Skywalker, Hyo Watanabe, Yuki Yoshioka, and Katsumi Takashima. Mike, is this one of the 10 most important matches in the history of Dragon Gate?
Especially with the power of hindsight, and you're pretty prescient in your review. Like, and we knew it at the time that this was special and that this was different. And I think that's one of the things that when we like go back and see people get recommended stuff as they get into Dragon Gate, this is inevitably one of those matches that's kind of shown as like, hey, Dragon Gate is not just all flippy doos and lucharettes. It's actually there's a backbone that is more towards Memphis style wrestling, and you get to see it kind of out the front. They come out to the team veteran music, and that immediately kind of I feel like that's an important tonal note, really, because like if they came out to Over Generation, it would not feel the same way. I feel like that would have felt pretty awful with it. Thoughts that I have in this, it's really hard for me in hindsight to get over Shun's look. how bad it was.
See, and it was an improvement over his debut look, because something that I think we've just gotten used to now, but something you and I would talk about constantly up through Shun's excursion was this guy would get new gear every month, and
he still does.
But now it's like he's an established main eventer. I would imagine, of the guys on the roster, he probably makes the nicest living outside of Yamato. I'm less concerned about it now.
Oh, when he was
a rookie, we were like, this guy's gonna be fucked. He's gonna have no money. Like, he's getting new gear every month. What is happening?
Yeah, it's like, does he have enough money to eat? Because he constantly. To be fair, it took him a long time to figure out good gear. So
it did.
It worked out in the long run, but it is just like the one big takeaway I think for anyone watching this with 2025 eyes is the transformation of Shun Skywalker, because he does. He has his spots here, but if I was to rank the 5 out of this match, I would put him below Benkei and HYO and maybe Yoshioka, because he just looks so. It is such a burial of a look for him.
That's very interesting. You're right in the sense that, like, I think one of the things that I love about Shun and why he is my favorite wrestler is I've watched his entire career in real time. I've seen 98% of the matches of his that have made tape. Only Joe Gagney has seen more because he watches everything, and we will have Joe Gagney on the show in 2025. But where Shun's at now was never the idea of what he could be. Benkei in 2025 being a 2-time Dreamgate champion. If you told me that after watching December 1, 2016, I would go, yes, that makes sense. Oh, he beat Pac at Kobe World. Yes, that makes sense. Oh, he was this transitional champion that led to this great Yamato title run. Yes, that makes sense. Shun Skywalker being a 2-time Dreamgate champion, leading a heel unit and doing it with this over-the-top charisma. And I'll pull out this reference again. Shun being the modern day Nick Bockwinkel, as I call him, because he's able to make everybody look good while never decreasing his own value. All of these things about Shun Skywalker were impossible to predict. Nobody saw this coming in 2016. Nobody saw this coming in 2017. Even when he starts to get pushed in 2018, it's not this like, oh, he's going to be a Dreamgate champion one day. That was an asinine thought in 2018 as he teamed with Mochi in All Japan, and as he got high-profile singles matches. It was still like nobody was thinking that this guy was going to be the lead heel for 3 years running and a 2-time Dreamgate champion. That all sounded insane only 6 or 7 years ago. It's the rookie ranking tournament in 2019, and then the subsequent Benkei match, and then the Pac Dreamgate match, where you start to go like, oh, I didn't know Shun had the ceiling. But even then, coming out of the Pac match in 2019, it was like, well, that was probably his peak, and, he'll do cool stuff. Dragon Gate clearly has a guy that they can play with here, but he's not going to be a bona fide main eventer coming out of this match. And then, we've seen his career over the last 5 years now be what it is, and it's remarkable. He is the guy out of the 5 guys in this class. Ben is kind of what we thought he would be, but maybe slightly disappointing. It's almost like the pressure of being the number 1 pick in the draft. Like if you're the number 1 pick in the draft and you're not a Hall of Famer, your career's a disappointment.
Sure,
and that's sort of the reality that Ben is living in. Yoshioka, who we haven't talked about much on the show because he only debuted at the end of October in this timeline, but Yoshioka was very good immediately. And Yoshioka's success does not surprise me at all. HYO, you and I were the only HYO fans on Earth until like 2020. So I'm not surprised that he was a Brave Gate champion, that at one point in time he was the most over guy in the promotion. That makes sense to me in my 2016 brain, because you and I both loved the guy at the start. Shun is the guy far and away that just blew away the expectations that we had coming out of this match.
Yeah, because you had Ben, who everyone already knew that was going to be accelerated. HYO came off like the most charismatic guy out of the 5.
We compared him at the time, and I wrote this in my review. I compared him to 1998 and 1999 CIMA, as in Michinoku Pro and early Toryumon Crazy Max era CIMA.
I think that we could probably, I don't think it's too far. I mean, era's enough. HYO's 2024 kind of lived up to that.
In terms of
popularity and overness and being able to be the backbone of the promotion and being like the person who kind of transcended his station. Like, because the thing with 1998, 1999 CIMA was Ultima was forcing him to be a heel because he knew, like, okay, I have Magnum. Magnum's the face. Magnum's the face. And then CIMA transcends Magnum very quickly. HYO transcends his station in 2024. And I think that even though it's not 1-to-1, and we're still talking about a guy who's never had a Dreamgate match whatsoever, but I don't think that comp is completely out to lunch 9 years later.
No, it was, the way he moved around the ring, the charisma that he had, it surprised me in real time. It surprised me that it took them so long to turn him heel, because I felt like we saw in this match that he was obviously an undersized heel, which is an incredibly valuable thing to have in your promotion, and it just seemed like that was his natural fit. I never saw the babyface thing that happened in 2024 happening the way that it did, but I saw the popularity there just in a different role.
Right. And then, as you said, yeah, Yoshioka, even like less than 2 full months in his career, looks really good. He hits a frog splash that looks as good as he hit it in 2023. And I guess, like, when we talk about the 5, not surprised he was Dreamgate champion, not surprised he won King of Gate, not surprised that he became the main character for a while. The big question for him is what's next. And, like, that's kind of the awkward situation of being a Yuki Yoshioka fan. Rewatching this did make me really miss Yuki Yoshioka. I'll say
my God. There's an account that I follow that had video highlights of him and Diamante from King of Gate on their feed today.
Oh,
and
great.
Yeah, if you didn't miss Yoshioka, go watch those clips and you will be missing him after that.
Yeah, look, how is it that, like, my favorites end up, like, either getting hurt or leaving the company, and then I just end up having a hole in my heart?
Well, it's a testament to, I thought, how strong the promotion was in 2024, that they were doing it without Yoshioka.
Sure.
And I tried to hit on that a little bit, and I'll reference this again when we record our year-end awards. But, I wrote the definitive guide of Dragon Gate in 2024 for voicesofwrestling.com, and one of the points I tried to hit on was that they did all of this without a former Dreamgate champion, a guy in the prime of his career who has been injured for an entire year in a way that it was an unexpected injury that seemed like maybe 6 months, okay, maybe 9 months. Oh, now he's been gone a year and he's still not back. And they marched forward, which was incredibly impressive. But Yoshioka here he looks more well-rounded than a lot of full-time wrestlers and other promotions that have been wrestling for a decade now.
Yeah, man. And we have not touched much on the veterans in this match.
Let's talk about Takashima real quick.
Yeah, Takashima, this is basically it for him.
This is it. He has a really interesting career in the same way that Sora Fujikawa has a really interesting career in that.
Right, yeah.
And I think about Fujikawa a lot and just how fucked up that whole situation was. But Takashima debuts in this match, and I went back and looked at, like, the Battle News article about this match and the Yahoo Japan article about this match, and it's all about Takashima debuting in Korakuen and his 2 big spots, which is, one, he does like a Mission Impossible backbend when Shima and Mochizuki try to roundhouse kick him.
Mm-hmm.
And then later Don Fuji has him in the Boston Crab, and I don't know exactly how to describe it. His whole thing was that he was super flexible. So he basically backbends his way out of a Boston Crab into a roll-up, which I've never seen anybody do before or since. But this match is as much the Takashima show as it is anybody else's other than Benkei, because the match revolves around Benkei.
Yeah, and really for Takashima, you get the sense that, okay, no wonder they kept the guy and they didn't kick him to the curb when he wasn't able to debut. And it's just sad how it just kind of pans out that he's a guy who we talked about had eye issues, and the eye issues were exacerbated by this match. Like,
I cackled seeing it's an early spot in this match where
the eye rake.
Yes, Takashima takes down Mochizuki. Mochizuki rolls to the floor. Shima comes in the ring and delivers a shoot eye rake that is done so viciously, and it's such a mean thing to do. But it works in the confines of this match in a really incredible way. Now, Takashima would wrestle basically through the end of 2017, and all of those 2017 Infinities are on the network. So other than this match, his entire career is on the network. He makes tape like there's a random Osaka show that he's on and a random Hakata Star Lane show, and I think he's on one or two other Korakuen. So if you want to see what else is out there, you can because it's on the network. But this is the Takashima match. I mean, he is, for a guy that had under 10 matches, it's, one of the more interesting careers you can have because of this.
Yeah, no, absolutely so. And it's one of those things where he becomes like one of those interesting footnotes of the promotion. And he clearly had ability. Like that's the thing that I kind of take away from that. It's just like, oh yeah, no, Takashima had it. It just, he was one of the, I don't know if you would call him, if you would put him in the same thing like Shoya Sato, but it just very much seemed like, in retrospect, him getting to debut and being in this match kind of was the win for him.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, throughout history, we've had a few of these. It's him, it's Fujikawa, who I just referenced, it's TN Revolution, of course, and then I'm now blanking on the guy from the T2P class that we talked about that was, promoted as the prize pupil of T2P, who ended up defecting back to Japan, and that all came out when we talked about him with Jay, where
you're talking about Tajima and Torimon X.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Torimon X. Yes, Tajima, was another guy who we have, I think, one match of his on tape, and then he goes away and only showed up at reunion shows. And there's a few of those throughout Dragon Gate history. I mean, even it's weird because especially in the case of Yohei, like we know what he ended up becoming, but Yohei and Kenshin Chikano are another one of those where you've got under 10 matches in Dragon Gate of those guys that make tape, and then they go away.
I think more than that. Because I mean they were fully featured in both Kamikaze and Warriors at one point.
I forget they were around that much. Let me go to the bleak Kenshin Chikano cage match.
I don't think he breaks 100 matches, but Kenshin Chikano was around for a while, then disappears to do quote unquote kickboxing.
Yeah, he's there for all of 2009.
Yeah.
The only question is how much tape he makes in 2009, just from the way that Infinities were formatted at that point.
Kenshin Chikano is 41 years old.
Time waits for no man.
They list his trainer Susumu.
There's a Nagoya style elimination match that allegedly made TV February 8th, 2009. Kagetora, Araken, Yamato, and Kanda against Mori, Dragon Kid, Kenshin Chikano, and Shingo Takagi. I sadly am going to have to look for that match.
Buddy, have fun looking for it.
That, unfortunately... that's the same show as Doi versus Owasa for the Dream Gate. What a bizarre show that is.
Hey, talk about a guy who we thought maybe had a chance to break out from that.
No kidding. Let me... you want to talk about the veterans? Talk about the veterans in this match real quick.
I think that one of the most interesting things about this match is the fact that it's DK playing a little bit of a heel.
It's, it's as much of a heel as he ever was, because even in Blood Warriors, he never fully committed to the bit. And watching Dragon Kid on offense in this match is borderline cute. It's something that you would never really see out of him except for in this environment.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right about that. And Mochi Fujii, like, this is the role that they would end up having from now on from this. CIMA is a demon, as we saw through it. Gamma just... It's wild that I feel like Gamma in 2016... in this match, I was like, oh yeah, Gamma was such a prick in this thing. And he's the one that had the least to say. Like, he feels like weirdly the add-on in a match where Dragon Kid's playing heel.
Yeah.
But just the finishing stretch, though, with HYO and Masaaki Mochizuki was so much fun, especially HYO like trying to shrug off things and then getting kicked straight in the head twice. Just great.
It's wonderful. Absolutely wonderful stuff. Do you have a favorite spot from this match?
I think it might be it's busted, and it's just the crowd pop makes it, but it is HYO's bad tarantula on CIMA. It is such and here I'll defend it here. You could tell that like HYO is so excited to like, oh, I'm with CIMA and I'm gonna do this great move, but did not pick up on the fact that CIMA was not gonna be cooperative in this match whatsoever. So he drags him like through the second rope, and it's like this weird, almost like comedy tarantula, and I thoroughly enjoy this. But I think like Yoshioka ends up like, I know you think that this becomes really like a Ben match. I think this really is the first strong performance of Yoshioka in his career, because he's the one who takes like the biggest beating out of all of them. He gets the big high spot with the frog splash, and I just kind of coming away from that, like my look was, again, missing Yoshioka a whole lot, but also he kind of enters with a bit of momentum, or at least acquits himself a lot better than I remembered him being.
I think the test case for, hey, Ben K as a rookie was this really important figure in Dragon Gate and everybody recognized it, was pretty early in the match. He and Mochizuki have a face-to-face stare down, and they've had a million singles matches since. I love their chemistry. They have some of my favorite Dream Gate matches in history. I would argue they've never felt hotter than they did in this match when Ben was a rookie, staring face-to-face in Korakuen.
No, that's fair. Yeah, and especially given where Mochi was, and he was kind of downcycled after Dia Hearts and kind of was a little bit wilderness wandering for the next few years. This was one of those moments where, like, yeah, no, Mochizuki takes the title from YAMATO the next year, but this was like one of those things like, oh yeah, Mochizuki is one of the baddest men alive, and you got that feeling throughout this match.
I do want to mention my favorite spot here real quick.
Oh yeah, please do, man.
CIMA and Mochi, like I said, they go for these high kicks on Takashima, and he does like the backbend, almost Mission Impossible style counter to them. And then Yoshioka hits the ring from there, and it begins this like 90-second stretch where Yoshioka comes in the ring and CIMA kicks him so hard in the face. And then CIMA rolls the floor. And so you get this moment where CIMA and Ben are brawling, and they're not in the crowd like on the steps of Korakuen. They're in between the ring and the front row. And CIMA's throwing these strikes that have so much velocity on them, and they look so violent, and it looks so heated. And Ben shakes the first set off, and so CIMA comes back, and he starts kicking him so hard as Ben falls into the front row of chairs, and CIMA almost starts kicking fans because he's like throwing rapid kicks. It's physically impressive what CIMA's doing, but he's doing them with so much force. Shun comes around the corner to make a save, and CIMA throws the ring announcer's table, the timekeeper's table, at Shun. And it's the beauty of this stupid sport all coming into play right here. Like, this is what I like, is it's this uncontrollable violent frenzy that all happens in the corner of the ring at Korakuen Hall, and it looks crazy. It's as mean as CIMA ever wrestled. Ben K is like a deer in headlights because he does what he should do. He does like a fighting spirit no-sell on the first set of strikes, and then CIMA hits him with the second set of strikes, and he has no idea what he's prepared for, and he gets his ass kicked. And then Shun tries to come in to make the save, and CIMA throws a table at him, and it's pure chaos, and it's just phenomenal.
God, these are the moments that I miss CIMA. And
yeah, well, this is my big takeaway from this match is, I'm not even saying it needs to take place in Dragon Gate, and I don't think you can ever duplicate this match. For as much as I like Mochi Jr. and Daiki and Ryoya Tanaka and Sahara, like I'm super, super bullish on this young class of guys. But I don't need them to do this match with Yamato, Doi, Dragon Kid, Susumu, Kagatora. I don't need the Paradox version of this match. I don't need the version of this match with Kondo and Awashi and Mochi and Fuji. Like, I don't need that. But there is something that the entire industry in both America and Japan could take from this match, which is just a sense of urgency that I think is really lacking from this match. I wrote about this. We'll bring Nick Bockwinkel back into the fold. For my wrestling playlist, Season of Giving playlist that I did, I wrote about a Nick Bockwinkel-Tito Santana match from Houston in 1981. And the thing that struck me was that up until the final 2 minutes of the match, they never leave the ring, but there's a sense of urgency. There's this desire to win. And that is getting lost in the fold here, I think, especially in Japan. And I think especially, and it's the Dragon Gate podcast. I think New Japan and Noah in particular really struggle with this, of just this overwhelming desire to win. And not every match needs to look like this. Not every match can feel like this. But I do think every match should strive to have what this match had, which is just a level of urgency and a level of violence that I really, really enjoyed about this. I mean, I've watched this match probably 10 times now. I feel like I watch it once a year, and every time my jaw is just on the floor at how good it is for what it is.
Yeah, I mean, you like take stock of this, and you're essentially having 5 guys with a combined, 8 months of wrestling experience go up against 5 guys who have a combined 100 years of wrestling experience. And the urgency you get out of the rookies is so special, and it is something that I wish all young lions and all rookies would have this urgency, because that's what's really missing, is like a sense of urgency or a desire for like these younger wrestlers to really like do this. I mean, when we're talking about now the most interesting person in pro wrestling, Noah, being someone just basically doing a troll / Goro Majima gimmick and like that kind of differentiation, you desperately need something more, I feel like. And the kind of more you need is having that level of urgency. And I feel like it's missed.
Can I read you a aggressively 2016 paragraph from my review?
Oh yes, take me back to 2016 Case Low.
This is going to age very poorly. I was writing about, Takashima, and then HYO, and then Shun, and then Yoshioka, and then I say, then last but not least, there was Ben K. I don't think he's comparable to Matt Riddle just yet, as Riddle has had many more months under his belt. That being said, I've never been as excited about a rookie as I am Ben K. He's every bit as good as Jun Akiyama was in 1992 or Shingo Takagi in 2004. This kid, a 25-year-old, stood toe-to-toe with Masaaki Mochizuki in the middle of Korakuen Hall. The guts, the heart, the intensity. Ben K will be a superstar. He's the next Shingo, and quite honestly, possibly the next coming of CIMA. This is a special talent.
I mean, now, as we kind of look back at it, how right you were, he was a special talent.
I don't know if he was the next Shingo. I don't know if he was the next coming of CIMA. He ended up being better than Matt Riddle. I will say that, which again, 2016, important to contextualize. You have been doing this thing in Dragon Gate, and then you have Matt Riddle on the US Indies, and part of this was a contingent of Southern indie wrestling fans that were using Matt Riddle as a propaganda arm. But Matt Riddle was legitimately incredible as a rookie, and the highlight of Evolve shows at Evolve's peak, him and Chris Hero at that point. So the class of 2016, you look at 2024 and, this rookie class where it's just like, fuck, all these guys suck. Like, I'm going to end up voting for Shawa in CMLL as my rookie of the year because he does a style of wrestling that I really enjoy. But top to bottom, there's
Harley Cameron might be my rookie of the year vote, to be honest.
Exactly. Like, it's a pretty bleak time for the future of wrestling. 2016 was not that. You had Fred Yehai, who I still love, Fred Yehai is the reason Fred Yehai is not booked places, but I really wish he would get booked more places. And then you had Ben, and you had Shun, and you had Matt Riddle, and you had the New Japan guys. We still had faith in Sho and Yo at this point. It was 2016, a much more hopeful time in wrestling.
Yeah, and I feel like at least when you like look at like someone like Hamare, we do get to see some differentiation. Like none of these five guys were immediately elevated like Hamare was, right? Like
no. I mean, look, again, we're talking about a young crop of guys right now that is Mochizuki Jr. and Kato and Ryoya Tanaka and Hamare. Forget Sahara and then the other two kids that haven't debuted. Those four right there are like holy shit level prospects. But in wrestling as a whole, we had far more hope in 2016 than we do now.
Yeah, no, that's fair. But and it's wild that this all happened around the point of that, like right as the company went to shit for 24 months.
Mm-hmm.
Like we keep on going back to like trying to find things in the promotion in 2017, 2018 to keep us going with it. And I think the way that those 2 years happened would not have happened without this match and without how these two, because we got to know at least three of them pretty well. Like they were constantly making tape at that certain point. And while we sit over here and Sahara makes tape pretty like a good amount, but it's not to the level that we saw in 2016.
No, this was the first class that I lived through in real time that taught me that not everybody is going to make it. And we didn't know that Dragon Gate was on this descent at this point in time. Things felt different. They didn't feel as good as they once did, but there was still a ton of optimism around Dragon Gate at the time. And the thought was, okay, let's say Ishida and Yamamura wash out, and let's say that we've seen Aegis peak and we've seen Maria's peak. Well, you have these 5 wrestlers that they can plug and play into any spot on the roster now. And what happened was, that happened with Ben, But Shun, I don't want to say was put on ice, but Shun didn't really do much for an entire year, and Yoshioka didn't do much for an entire year. HYO was considered a failure up until recent history, and Takashima retired. So it was a painful reminder with this class, like leaving this show. The takeaway was Dragon Gate has 5 new superstars. They have 5 new Tozawa, Yoshino, Doi, Shingo, Shima, Mochizuki types. And what we saw is that, I think Shun has gotten to a level like that. I think Ben has gotten very close. I think Yoshioka has gotten very close. And HYO, down a separate avenue, has become a star, but it took much longer for Yoshioka and HYO specifically than we thought that it would.
Yeah. And I think it's a lesson that you should always keep a share of your Kota Minoura stock, because you never know. We held those shares of HYO stock, and we're feasting now. So those things happen. And I'm looking at this Dragon System era spreadsheet that I refer to occasionally, where I've tried to make sense of eras and like this. And you look at, and I'm going to go back to this, to how things were in that previous era, where really, as I'm like updating this, I'm going like, oh, I need to like make sure Eita is marked through and like this. You see a real like line of, I think that there can be an argument made that if you want to look at the late 2000s and early 2010s Dragon Gate Dojo, outright, I would call it kind of a failed period, because you, at least in 2025 eyes, because you look at, okay, out of the millennials generation, the only 3 people are left are Yosuke Santa Maria, UT, and Ryotsu Shimizu. Like, those 3 are the ones left, and I think we can. Which
means, for clarification, so that means we factor in on the spreadsheet that's the 6th era in the millennials. So that's like Yohei, Chikano, Kotoka, Kazushi Harada, T-Hawk Maria, Eita, UT, Shimizu, Lindemann is how we mark that period.
Right. Yeah, and that's probably not giving credit to some people who have like flowed through the dojo at some time, like the same way like Kazama Sumi and people like that,
Mm-hmm.
But you look at how things were from that era, and then you look at how things were from this class of 2016 transitional era into all caps Dragon Gate, and then what was the Dragon Gate Future project. And this is the start of the revitalization of the Dragon Gate Dojo system, I feel like. And I don't know if that says bad things about where the dojo was in 2008 through 2015. I mean, we've heard enough stories from Yamato about how things were for a certain group of time, but at least when you look at how people flowed in and flowed out, you're getting people who stick more or injury issues. And that was not the case in the late 2000s and the people who are in the late 2000s and early teens.
No, I mean, we know what KZ is now, but you have to remember the post-Yamato dojo is KZ, and then they inherit Yoshida, and then it's, Lupin Matsutani and Problem Dragon, and then all the guys we just mentioned, Yohei through Lindemann, and then Yamamura and Ishida, who were bust for different reasons. Yamamura a little bit more tragic than Ishida. This all happens, and that's a decade where you have an underperforming T-Hawk and a disappointing Eita and a KZ who outlasted all expectations as sort of your shining pupils. And so the class of 2016, you're right, it's a complete factory reset on what this dojo needed to be. And I still think to this day, the only comparable class to the class of 2016 is the class of 97. I think 3 Dreamgate champions and a guy who was considered the most popular guy in the company last year, other than the Dreamgate champion, is as close to Shima, Suwa, Don, Fuji, Dragon Kid, and Magnum Tokyo as we will probably ever see again.
Yeah, and it's kind of something that if you're someone who is kind of tentative with Dragon Gate, I think a lasting message that this episode can teach you is Dragon Gate is one of the most rewarding promotions to follow people, because we can just look back 8 years ago and be like, we've seen the entirety of Benkei's career, and we've seen HYO Watanabe, and I keep on going back to HYO because HYO is my guy, but we see him basically struggle, and then if you commit to it and you don't give up, things might click and things can change. And it's the same thing with KZ, but you get to see this system really produce like the stars that are now the backbone of the promotion. And I wonder how much of an indictment that really kind of is to the holdovers from the Torimon era that you really only had coming out of T2P. You only really had Yoshino and Doi be those top line guys. No one out of Torimon X figures into that really within Dragon Gate. But it took basically 15 years, like with the exception of Shingo Takagi, BB Hulk, and Akira Tozawa and Yamato, to start producing like top line prospects. But keeping with the prospects can be an intensely rewarding experience, and I think Dragon Gate rewards people who give that level of attention and devotion more so than anyone else. And I feel like 12-1-16 kind of embodies that as well as anything.
12-1-16, one of the most important matches in the history of the promotion. One of my favorite matches in the history of the promotion. If you've never seen it before, I've put it on YouTube for free. Give it a watch. If you haven't seen it since it aired, or if you haven't seen it in years, also take the time out of your day. Go watch this match. I think it'll stun you at, how different Shun wrestles and how much life Yoshioka showed and how exciting HYO looked. And then, of course, Benkei at this time where Benkei was revered by all. It's just a very, very interesting match to go back and watch.
Absolutely. And I think it's kind of the perfect moment to close out our 25th anniversary series of Rewind and Rewatch, looking back to the big moments in the history of the Dragon system. Then the moment that really launched Dragon Gate's present in 12-1-2016. It's just one of those special things. And yeah, I really would encourage people to, even if you've watched this match recently, to give it clear eyes and give it an opportunity and think about like how things were and how things are. Because I feel like that's what I really took out of this time, is just how drastic of a different promotion this was. And even though like I usually push back at a lot of people saying it's not your dad's Dragon Gate, there is merit to that argument. But this also shows that your dad's Dragon Gate can produce like the wonderful promotion we see today.
Yeah, I don't think the ceiling is any different. I do think this Korakuen does feel very different from a 2024, 2025 Korakuen. I think that was good for me to go back and see. I'll always just push back on, I think the good is as good as ever, and I think the ceiling is still incredibly high. And the thing that I enjoy most about the promotion is that I think they have the highest floor out of any promotion in the world, and I don't think that quality has dipped. And in fact, I think it is the floor has only been raised since 2016, 2017, 2018. So that is where I stand on Dragon Gate going into 2025.
Absolutely. And we will talk more about the year of 2024 in Dragon Gate this weekend, as we are going to put together our best of. It's the Ulti Awards coming up, and it should be hitting your feed later this weekend. Case, do you have anything else you want to touch on before we get out of here tonight?
I do not.
So you could follow us on social media at Open Voice Gate. If you'd like to join us in more discussion and see the match listings, please go to the Voices of Wrestling Discord. We have an Open the Voice Gate channel. I will be posting, or actually I see Case doing it right now.
Separate posts. I'm still going to ask you to post those.
Yeah. By the time when this show goes up, you will have a full match listing covering the class of 2016, and also the Dragon Gate channel, where we talk about things like whatever happened to Jimmy and why the company missed out on having him be Jimmy. They really should have had Jimmy be Jimmy Case.
That was a bummer. Missed opportunity.
Yeah, missed opportunity there. But that's going to do it for us this episode. We'll be back with you in a couple days talking about the best of 2024. We will be with you then. Take care, everyone.
Hello, Voices of Wrestling listener. Dave Ryan here. Have you ever wondered to yourself how many hidden gems are hidden away inside the last years of World Championship Wrestling? Have you ever asked yourself how many tenuous gags can be made about the name Mike Enos? And have you ever thought about what it sounds like for two Irishmen to interpret a very chaotic company through its B show? The answers to all this and more are just a click away. Check out Days of Thunder every second Thursday on the Voices of Wrestling Podcast Network.